right.
Sure is.
In accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. If we could all stand and move the pledge.
Recording in progress.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start with our board member reports. Mr. O'Leary?
I'm all set.
You're all set?
All set.
Mr. Wallner?
Yes. So two things. One is the Forest Committee, which is sponsoring working on the Swan Pond Forest Trails. We have a public meeting coming up on April 24th at 6:30, and that's going to be at the Distance Learning Lab. And it's going to be, our consultants are going to be giving a proposal to the community on how we're going to be opening up the Swan Pond Trails, plans for how we plan to go forward with that, and we invite people to come in. The goal of everything we're doing is to increase access for the town, but not to disturb the green forest in any way more than we have to at all. So the goal is to keep it pristine, respect the neighborhood, and to make all this beautiful trails available to the town that hasn't been accessible before. And we're not working alone. We're working with the Swan Pond Association, we're working with the Conservation Committee, we're working with the Land Utilization Committee, and we're working with the school department and whoever forget the town government, because those are all stakeholders in what's going on. So again, please come. It's Wednesday night, April 24th, 6:30, at the Distance Learning Lab. Come learn what's going on, so we're all aware. Then at the last meeting, the Tax Aid Committee went through our proposal. We haven't voted on it. We did vote on it, so we're in unanimous agreement that the proposal we gave to you was what we'd like to go forward. The only adjustment we made, which was Vincenzo's suggestion, was that we put an asset limit on that. We did a survey of towns, and we found that we should have a $275,000 asset limit, which was, very reasonable for what we're doing. And anybody who's be taking advantage of this, that shouldn't be a hard thing for them to be able to get. So that was the one adjustment we made. Other than that, we're in unanimous agreement about that going forward. So expect to see that on the town warrant. And the last thing I'll say is the surveys that went to every household that went with the census, which was transportation and disabilities. We now have those in place. I think about 331 surveys came back out of the 6,000 households we hit, and 145 of those are describing some sort of disability that the Commission on Disability will be digesting next week with a plan to come back with action about how we can reach out to those people. And that's talking about anybody who's from newborn all the way up until your oldest age. So we're trying to work on it. So 3 things happening all at once. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Mandy Kelly.
I'll be brief, I'm all set.
Mr. Studo. He'll be speaking later.
I'll lower this back down, Madam Chair. Good picture.
All right. And I'm also all set. We can move on to public comment. If there's anybody here that would like to speak for public comment, you could come up. Are we coming up to the microphone?
I don't have to.
I know, but
I have a lot of schoolboys that I can read.
for NORCAM's sake.
All right. And I hope you don't mind me
Mrs.
reading some of
Fillmore.
my notes. Excuse me. Thank you. Pat Fillmore, 24 Field Crest Terrace. And I just tried to make sense out of what you as a board are telling people, that we as a town don't have any money. And you have been saying that for the past several years, that we've next to nothing, but we keep spending. I mean, and one, look at the ARPA funds, $700,000. And I know the ARPA funds can't be used for balancing a budget. But we have some major things that they could go to. Article 23, I think, on the warrant this year, funding the town repairs. Money could go toward that. Big capital items that the town could be paying for. Burrows Road, Chestnut Street. You know that money that's been put aside for that isn't anywhere near what it's gonna cost. Second thing, the last several years, you stop and think, we have been creating positions. And I think back to one where you had a public safety administrator. And now you've got a public service. So you've got two big wigs in two positions that are overseeing, and one was just a stipend, on one of them.
Right, and that's gone.
And now that person's gone.
Right.
But now, are we gonna hire that person, another person to take that job? A person overseeing all these departments, when we have, in fact, department chairs that are trained, that know their business and their department. So now they've got the select board watching over them, the town administrator watching over them. And are we paying the department chairs just to hang out and make some small decisions, or wait till somebody can give me permission to make some big decisions? It's just crazy. And last but not least, we look at the budgets, and I understand budgets. And I see what the FinCom is doing and making sure that people stick to their needs. But then we have the school department. Why aren't they dissecting the school department budget? You've got a group in the school, their contract was just settled, 16% pay raise. And yes, it's over 3 years, I think, our school, contracts used to go for. 16%. How can you justify that? If they're gonna dissect the public works, or if they're gonna dissect, the elderly, the senior citizens.
Recording in progress.
Why not dissect every department, including the school, and make them accountable? A 2.5 override isn't gonna solve everything. Because next year you'll have the same problem if we keep spending money the way we're spending it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for speaking. Anyone else?
I second that.
You're all set, Mr. De Niro? All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on. Now,
Chair,
yes.
I do think we did use the ARPA, we did vote because it was going to be taken back, and I really
Right.
want to make sure that factually is clear here, that we did put that towards approved capital projects to assist with the payment for some of the projects that the town had approved.
Right, but going toward wastewater, that 3/4 or 90% of the town doesn't want, $700,000 went to wastewater. 500,000 at one shot, and then before that it was 200,000, I think.
I don't want to debate this because
No, I know.
we did have to take a vote, and we did have to use those funds. What I'm trying to say is, some of those projects that you mentioned, some of those projects that you mentioned, we specifically, we wanted to not lose that one-time funding
Yeah,
to
I hear
put
you.
it towards that. So we really were trying to make sure that we didn't lose that. So,
Thank you for clarifying that, Mrs.
I don't know if I did, but, just to make sure for the record that that's.
I did close public comment, but Mr. De Niro.
Oh,
Oh, can I come on? Okay, Paul De Niro, Project Park Street. I was just thinking in my mind, 2 weeks ago, I was looking for something on the North Reading website, and I couldn't find it. I don't remember what it was. So anyway, I went to Reading, and I found it. I went to Andover. But what I wasn't looking for, and I found, is that both of those towns have sewer. Council, Reading and Andover. I think I'm correct there. And both of them were put in proposal to pierce the veil of Prop 2.5. And some of them got approved and some of them didn't get approved, some of the items, in both towns. So I'm saying to myself, you know, we heard when we first started talking about the wastewater system and the Wright Pierce consulting piece, which is on the North Reading website. You know, it says that there'll be plenty of money for the town. There won't be, like this lady was saying, we're running short of money. And so I'm wondering, how does Andover and Reading, I don't know how long ago they got the sewer, probably 15, 20 years ago, but why are they looking to break through the Prop 2.5 if they have this great money-making machine? And does that foretell what would happen to us if we owned the town? So most of the people that I know are against it. So how do we square away the fact that Reading and Andover are needing funds and they do have it? I'd like to know the answer if somebody could explain it to me.
I don't think there could be an answer to that. There'd be so many
Well, you may
different-
know the people from Andover or Reading and
Every
you may
town
be
has its
friends with
own
them, you know.
issue.
I don't know, but anyway, that's my point.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right. All set? Anybody else for public comment? I'm gonna close it. And we're gonna move on to recognize the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the flag of the town of North Reading. If Sylvia Mayo. So Sylvia, welcome.
Hello.
Sylvia was the Girl Scout leader of the group 50 years ago that developed this town flag. And it was adopted at the April 1st, 1974 town meeting. Do you have Girl Scout? Were you part of the Girl Scout too?
I have 3 of them with me.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love it.
And my assistant.
And the town moderator, the town meeting moderator.
The town moderator, yes, he was at the time. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I have a few words to say about the flag. On February 1974, the Girl Scout Troop 293 approached the selectmen and asked if we could have approval for our proposed flag. At the time, the town did not have a town flag. We received overwhelming support for the flag, and we learned about the history of flags, met with the town administrator at the time, and learned about town government. After researching the history of the town, the Scouts decided on the design to be used, raised the money to have it professionally made, and had the flag adopted by unanimous vote of the town meeting. We had the flag made and returned to the town meeting and presented the beautiful town flag to the town. I want to thank the select board at this time for commemorating the 50th anniversary when the Girl Scouts completed and adopted the plan, and the town people adopted this flag. I want to thank Maureen for her help in locating some of the girls in the troop and writing a lovely article about the upcoming 50th anniversary. Another huge thanks to my very able and competent assistant leader at the time, Mrs. Germino, who's sitting here today. You may ask, why did the troop make the town flag? Well, here's the history of the town flag. It all started in the fall of 1973. It took the girls a full year to design the flag and have it made. When the Girl Scout Council was making plans for Expo 74, it was suggested that we'd have a parade and all the troops would have their town flag. If no town flag with the town like one designed, our troop volunteered to have it made, and there was no town flag at the time. The town administrator at the time, Mr. Rabchinek, liked the idea of the town flag, and that if the girls designed it and presented it to the town, it would be a great civic project for them to work on. After talking to town officials, numerous organizations in the town, and among ourselves, the following symbols were suggested for the town flag: the town seal, the building on the common, the tree on the common, the Putnam House, and the outline of the town. At our meetings, we discussed many times all the above ideas, the colors to use, the cost of the flag, how it would be manufactured, and so forth. In designing the flags, the leaders thought it would be useful for the girls to know the history of the town itself and the history and use of flags. And the girls researched these. The colors chosen by the girls were the school colors, yellow and green. And the dates around the green triangle are the dates on the town seal. You can't see them there, but there's 1631 is the date that Reading received a land grant north of the Ipswich River. In fact, at one time, Reading, North Reading, Wakefield, and Reading came all from the town of Reading at the time that they were decided. In 1713 was establishment of the North Parish, and 1853 is when the incorporation of the town of North Reading. The tree in the center of the triangle is the great oak on the common, believed to be over 300 years old. Well, now it's over 350 years old anyway. And it signified strength, endurance, and life. The leaders decided that the girls should earn a badge for all their work in making the flag, so they all earned a badge entitled Our Own Town Flag Badge. Now, for your information, I'm not sure if anyone knows this, in 1998, it was almost 25 years after the adoption of the flag, Representative Brad Jones had another town flag made, and together with Mrs. Gerino and me, we presented the North Reading town flag to the State House officials for display in the Great Hall, which houses all the city and town flags of the Commonwealth. So if you're in Boston, drop in the State House and see our flag there. At this time, I'd like to ask Jean Gemino to stand up and be recognized, my assistant. Where are you? And finally, a few of my Girl Scouts are here. Would you please stand up and give us your full name and what you would like to, if you'd like to say a few words, state them at this time.
Paula Dwyer from town. Cherry Mayo, Morrow.
And you're in this picture?
Yes, far right.
Is this you right here? Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm not in there. And actually, my maiden name is Graham. So.
Oh.
So I have a little booklet here that I made myself. The original of this book has been in the library, the Flint Memorial Library, for 50 years. I gave it to this Mrs. Nett, who was this children's librarian at the time. And I had moved out of North Reading and lived in Wilmington for about 46 years. I came back 5 years ago, and the first thing I did was go to the library and see if I could find the book. Well, they had all kinds of trouble. We couldn't find it. So finally, after several calls, one of the librarians said, I think I know where it is. And she took me to this locked room. I think it has all the archives and some of the historical things.
Local
And
history, yeah.
she found the book, and then she said she was going to, record it someplace. But anyway, the book tells the whole story in my words at that time. Has some of the pictures of the girls. And like some of the girls wrote history of the flag of the town, and some of them were writing like a little essay about what everything was. And we had girls that wrote about the flags and what they meant. And then I put in here all they had to do for the flag, for their badge, which was what we had to do: learn the history of the flags, learn the history of the town, find out about town government. And so if anybody ever wants to see it, you have to go to the library, but if you want to see it tonight, I'll leave it here for a few minutes. And so I want to thank everybody for having us, and I really appreciate that you're doing something for the 50th anniversary. The girls worked really hard to do this. And don't forget, they were like 10 and 11. And my daughter turned 12 the month before it was adopted at Town Hall, so the oldest ones were 12.
Well, I want to thank you
Cool.
so much. Don't go anywhere. Don't go
You gotta
anywhere.
get their picture by the flag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna, yeah, we're probably all gonna have something to say to you, and we have something for you, and we want to take a picture with the Girl Scouts with your assistant leader. I'll start. I was a Girl Scout. My mom was a leader. I was a leader. I brought my girls right up into high school, and they actually went to the State House and saw the flag.
Oh, you did?
Yes. So, you know, you gave kudos to your girls, but I'll give kudos to you as a leader, because it's not an easy thing to do, and it sounds like you were an amazing leader.
I
So,
did. I had to go to different organizations and get their ideas and
Yeah.
some of their backgrounds.
yeah.
And it was
You were
a hard
very
job.
dedicated,
All
so.
the leaders were really very good, cooperative, and the girls at the time were enthusiastic. Two of them don't remember anything about it that are here tonight.
My colleagues, if you'd like to.
No, I think that it's fantastic to hear this history and to know that you created such a creative project, but creating a piece of the town's history and all the meaning behind it, all the thought and the meaning that was put into it. And even a handwritten book is pretty amazing. Now people would just be typing it
I
on.
know.
Yeah.
But we actually have an archival record of it that's been handwritten by the producers of the flag. So I think it's pretty wonderful. I'm glad that you came here to explain this to us.
Thank you.
50 years later. So it's pretty cool, because most people have no idea
Right.
how this originated and what the symbolism
Well, I don't think
behind it
anybody
is.
knows about it, because one of my friends, I live in a condo now, one of my friends, when she was reading the transcript, so she taught us something about the town flag. Oh, now what are they trying to do, she said. I said, read the article.
Change it, yeah. And it's actually a timeless design too, which is
It is, the tree
fantastic.
Yes, I'm so glad. Hopefully the tree
Right.
lasts forever.
Right,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So, great presentation.
No, this is nice for many of us that haven't been in town for a long time. Like there's a lot of people who have moved in as the town has gotten large, and this is not something that is just, it's not like you move into North Reading, somebody's like, hey, let me tell you about this. So this is really, nice just to learn about the history, and it kind of brings you up to speed on what the town was about before and now, kind
Like those
of piece
three
together.
dates were around the town seal.
So, great.
I was a Boy Scout and all we did was skits. This is much better. Thanks for doing something productive.
We had fun, but we had a lot of work that time.
I was a Girl Scout too. My leader was Mrs. Kasabian, and she was phenomenal. She had all these kind of thought-provoking projects, so this is fantastic. So
Yeah, it's a great organization.
we all have to give ourselves, tell you that we were scouts.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. O'Leary?
I remember when. Because I was there when it happened, but, it was a tremendous gift then, and it's a gift today, that it's still here. You're here to tell us about it, and remind some of the newcomers here as to what took place and what went into it, what the girls did. Jean and her husband Bob, what they've done for the community over the years is, again, a thankless job, but they've tremendous community, community activists and leaders in the community, but, you know, what the Girl Scouts did then was, the town was excited about it, because some people didn't even know we didn't have a flag. Well, why don't we have a flag? And then, you know, the impetus came from your leadership and the girls' imaginations, and they chose an iconic tree on the common, which is still standing today, and that we take great care of because it means so much. It is a symbol within our community in the center of our town. And it's memorialized right here in the flag 50 years later. And even that, in and of itself, is phenomenal that the tree has been able to survive this long. But be assured, we take great care of that tree, and it does mean something to us. And it's memorialized here. And 25 years ago, when you brought it to the State House, that was monumental too, because some of us would say, we have a flag. That's weird. We had a flag. It said, let's get another flag made. Why isn't it hanging at the Great Hall? And that took place 25 years
That
ago.
was Brad Jones that did that.
Yes,
There's a picture of him.
right there.
And Mrs. Jamino, Brad, that's the town, the State House archivist or whatever he is. And, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a picture of you also.
Do you?
At the town meeting.
The flag is the flag is aging far more gracefully than I am.
Never mind, look at me, it was 50 years ago.
Yeah, but, and again, now everybody's published too. So we have a publication with everybody in there. So the Girl Scouts are published, you're published, and we should make some copies of that and have it available for distribution. But no, really, it's a true gift back then. It's a still gift today. And we're so appreciative of the effort that was put into it 50 years ago and 25 years ago to get it hung at the Great Hall in the State House. And it's wonderful to have you here to celebrate again 50 years later.
Yeah.
So,
I
much
couldn't let it
appreciated.
pass without having something done.
And Mr. Gilberto, you were a scout also, weren't you?
A Boy Scout, yes.
Right.
And I spoke to Michael earlier, he was the first person I spoke to about getting something together here.
Yeah, thank you for your efforts.
Very nice.
So, thank you, and we'd like you to come on up here, the Girl Scouts and your assistant leader.
You want to walk around towards the side, around the back side?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Left one?
I think we're going to come to the front.
Oh, we're gonna come to the
Bring the
front?
flag up, what are you gonna do?
We're going to leave the flag there.
Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna need some more light.
You come in front.
We're going to go in front. Right here.
I guess so.
Yeah, so what I was thinking, okay, so we want, yeah, we definitely want to be able to see the flag, so. Can we reverse?
Yeah, I'm just gonna have her hold this certificate, Mrs. Mayo, and, yes, we're Paula.
Yep.
I'll go right aside. Okay, Leanne. So you don't have to say I'm sorry.
Sorry.
And we're not the other board members. Yeah, well, I don't want it all that long. So, if they you can step forward, just need it so.
We can squeeze it.
Yeah.
Can't pull down one more.
Okay, yeah, you're not blocking it. Okay, Rich and Kate need to switch.
Switch, okay.
Yes, because you're taller.
Here we go.
I know. Well, this guy's got like, just look at him for a second. Okay. Okay, look over here. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to try a chair. Find it on the chair.
Oh, yeah, you can do that.
I think she's practiced.
Are we up on the chair? Yeah, I'm serious.
still taller than you even when you're on your feet.
We're all set?
Congratulations. Thank you very much for bringing that forward.
Good to see you. Hi, Jane, how are you? Good to see you. All right, Sylvia, nice to see you. Good to see you. All right.
We all said.
We weren't good Boy Scouts. We didn't do much. Nice job, Michael.
I don't have to do a hearing notice.
There's 3 notices. You can read just read the 3 addresses when I get to the address line.
Where is
And it's in the packet. If you don't need to read it 3 times. Yeah.
Okay, I found it.
You got it? Okay. Sorry, mine's still loading.
Oh, that was at 7:45.
What?
Do I say 7:45 or do I say 8:20?
They still say 7:45.
I still say
Just read what it
7:45.
They
says.
still say 7:45.
Okay,
So
then I'm on
there was
time.
adequate notice so people could get here in
We're
case
all
there was traffic,
set.
you know?
All right. Okay, notice of public hearing, courtesy notice. In accordance with Chapter 138 of the Massachusetts General Laws, thank you. An in-person and virtual public hearing will be Monday, April 1st, 2024, in Room 14, Town Hall, 235 North Street, North Reading, Massachusetts, and via virtual technology at 7:45 p.m. on a request to install a light on existing pole number 6 in front of 1 Barbary Road, but there were also 3 others?
Yep. Vogue Street and Red Hill Road.
All right, so we have,
Madam Chair, through you.
yes.
This is a courtesy hearing. It's not a public hearing under the general laws, but it is an opportunity for anyone who may have a concern to express it. We received 4 streetlight requests in relatively the same time. One of them we received initially and was resubmitted. Another had been pending for some period of time. And then a third came in more recently, and then the 4th one was also came in fairly recently. So we looked at all 4 of them sort of at the same time in advance of this hearing. One on Virginia Road was not recommended to be installed, so it is not before you here this evening. And I believe the police department spoke with the resident with regard to that situation, so thank you. The other 3 are recommended. It's 1 light on each street where there are some issues relative to darkness. So these will be new street lights on existing poles. They will be LED like the rest of our street lights are, and we will request them from Reading Light should they be approved. And I don't know, Madam Chair, if there's anything further that the board needs. We have the engineer and the police department here who have conducted a review. I think you have their reports in your packet. They're recommending these 3 for installation. Through you, Madam Chair, we could turn it over to anyone from the public who had anything they wanted to add, and if not, there's, I believe, 3 motions.
Okay, absolutely. Any of my colleagues, any questions? Yes, Mr. O'Leary?
Except for that, over the years, and it hasn't happened where we've had to put new lights out, but put them up, but we've actually set them off over the years, but put new ones up. You know, my concern is, again, for the direct abutters, it certainly is a change in the environment when you put a street light out in front of someone's home, you know, shining in their home, in their bedroom, and, you know, in their living rooms and all the rest. So I just want to be assured that, you know, the residents were adequately notified. There was some discussion with the direct abutters, and that there are no objections. You know, that's the, and if there are objections, I like to hear them, that's all.
So I will-
otherwise,
I will have my colleagues, and then I will.
yeah, so I just want to be sure that that there was adequate notification of the neighbors, because it is a change. It's a significant change. some people think it's good, some people think it's bad. So it's and over the years, we've had complaints where we flip the light on and they go, what are you doing, you know?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, through you,
Yes.
just to respond to that, the Volk Street and Red Hill Road light requests were both from residents of those streets. And then the Barbary Road was actually a request from somebody who was not a resident, but frequents the little school property and observed that there was a gap in where things were illuminated. We mailed a courtesy notice to abutters in the area, so they were notified. I have not had anybody who's contacted us with an objection to it. Other than the request, I have not had any direct conversation through you, Madam Chair, to Officer Tilton and to the town engineer. I don't know whether you've had any conversation with folks that you want to share one way or the other, but this might be the time to do so.
I did visit the area during nighttime, and that intersected way would only affect one resident. The brick house in the corner was actually a crossing guard during the daytime at that
Which
point.
was the Barbary?
Barbary, sorry, off of Southwick. That location is if you look at the thing, it involves two crosswalks, crossing from Southwick over to Barbary and also the length of Southwick to Southwick. And that corner where the school does have a lot of evening activities, that area in question is very dark. Given the foliage of the trees being so tall, there's no ambient light that lights up that intersecting way of those crosswalks, especially if they have nighttime activities. So it's a very dark corridor when you first turn on to Barbary from Southwick right there. And they do have a lot of lights in the school area, and they have lights on either side of the intersecting way, but it does not light up that turning on to Barbary in that school area, which is actually a school zone.
My colleagues.
I think that there's pictures in the packet and the diagram, and they look like they're pretty innocuous locations for lights, you know, where they're proposed for. It looks like they were not really directly, they wouldn't directly be out in front of. I have one up in front of my house, so when you hear stuff out there, you're glad it's out there to lift the blinds up and see what's going on, you can see clearly. So they seem to be pretty innocuous with their proposed. But probably helpful to lighting the dark locations.
All right. Sir, if you want to come up to the microphone and just state your name and your address for us. Thank you.
Hello. My name is David McCauley. This is my wife Stacy. We live at 6 Red Hill Road. That's our home, actually right there. There's only technically about 5 houses on that street. We've talked to the other couple of neighbors there also. I don't need to bring their names into the conversation at this point, but we have spoken to them. I work basically a day shift, but I'm on 24-hour call and stuff. So it's just basically my wife's at the house. I do get called in the nighttime, et cetera, et cetera. We have had an incident actually with the North Reading Police Department. You might have been.
Yes, I spoke to them, yes.
Yes, and I appreciate that. Thank you. That we had some activity up there. Excuse me, there's no lights. There's 3 poles on that street, but there's no lights whatsoever. So the only lights you do have that illuminate is either the house or we got like little tiki torches, you know, solar lights and stuff like that. That's the only lights that you see. We, just for location purposes, we are right across from the Hillview Country Club, where North Street is basically lit up very well and stuff. But this area, it's really pitch black up in that area. There is no lights. There is a neighborhood probably a couple hundred yards behind us. There is some lighting there also. We have a very large amount of animal activity up there, and that is of concern. The deer, they're there, no problems, but we are seeing a lot more activity with the coyotes. I believe they're coyotes, I'm not sure. But we have all security throughout the property premises and stuff. And I can show you activity up until even this morning where we've had that concern and stuff. I'm not saying the light's going to deter them from being on the property, but at least for our purpose, we at least see them. You know, we know not to go out. I do go out at nighttime, we do have a hot tub. So we are out there.
Tiki torches, a hot tub.
Yeah.
It's a good time. You sure you want to light?
It's all for relaxing purposes. Relaxing purposes. But, yeah, it's just, it's of concern, and the other concern absolutely is when I do get called in at nighttime, it's just basically my wife at the house and stuff. You know, there are, the neighbors do have some dogs. Every so often you will hear some, you know, activity come from them and stuff. But it's definitely a safety issue right now. And the other two neighbors that I did talk to and stuff, they didn't have any problems with putting a light up in that area and stuff. So.
Okay.
Great.
So you're happy that it's going in?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, would be, yeah.
Great.
I have to say, I'm afraid to go outside at night because it's so dark up there.
It's
So
totally
when
pitch
these at
black.
nights and I have to bring the barrels in and stuff, I won't go outside because it's pitch black. I think it's just.
So now you don't have to bring the barrels in anymore.
Oh, now we're getting to the issue.
He's gonna be in the hot tub, she's shagging the barrels.
Just for full disclosure, my wife grew up next door to him.
Huh?
Sue McDonald.
Come on. It's salt of the earth people, absolutely. Absolutely. My father worked with her.
Yeah, I know, yeah, they were both in the fire department of Peabody, his father and my father-in-law, yeah.
Oh,
Good
okay.
friends, good neighbors.
Good people.
Good people.
Small world.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you for speaking.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here for this issue that would like to speak on it? State your name and your address.
My name is Michelangelo Nicholas Aparlis. I live on 2 Cobblers Lane, North Reading, Massachusetts. Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you guys know by any chance how much it would cost, just out of curiosity, like to put is it just the lights or is it also the posts up to? Just wondering.
The poles are there.
The pole's an existing
Poles
pole,
are-
it would be a
okay,
light
cool.
fixture.
Okay, cool.
So you wanted to know the cost?
Yeah, if that's there. If it's not, that's okay.
So I don't have the cost offhand. We forward these requests over to Reading Light. And eventually the light appears. The cost mostly materializes in the form of an additional electrical cost and a larger bill that we pay for street lights. Joe, I think the budget for that is in the $70,000-ish range right now. Keep in mind, as Mr. O'Leary indicated earlier, there was a point in time where roughly 40 to 50% of the streetlights were turned off, and then gradually, it was for budget savings, they were gradually turned back on. We had the opportunity about 8 years ago to transition all of the lights to LED, turn on the lights that were off, and still have less of an electric utility charge for it, which we did do. So this will be an incremental increase to that cost, but not substantial in nature.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I know, we should have thought of that question. All right.
Okay, I believe there are 3 motions.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the installation of a new street light at 1 Bayberry Road on utility pole number 6.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Madam Chair, I move to approve the installation of a new street light at 8 Vogue Street on utility pole number 4.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. Madam Chair, I move to approve the installation of a new street light at 4 Red Hill Road on utility pole number 4.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. Let the light shine.
You have a light. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thanks for the report, Jim.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks,
You're up.
I get to defer to administration.
All right, so we are going to move on to wastewater update.
Thank you. Is the DPW director here?
I saw him.
He opted to leave at just the right moment. He's not getting off that easy. Madam Chair, through you while we're awaiting the DPW director. So we have a presentation that we have prepared that builds on a report that was in the meeting packet for the board members, about an 8-page report that you saw prepared by our consultants. The presentation is fairly lengthy because there's a lot of information that goes into it. I think we may need to kind of feel our way through to determine whether we want to just sort of hear the information and further consider and deliberate at a future point in time, or we want to get right into it. That certainly is the board's decision to make. But there is quite a bit of data that's in there, and we've taken it to try to make it somewhat useful for you and for the community in response to the task that we were charged with back in the fall for gathering data. So, DBW director has the final version of the presentation and is on his way in. It may be literally hot off the press.
Grand entrance. You want to give you a little speech?
He's coming.
You don't have to give your recusal
Oh,
speech.
yeah,
and go
do you
to
want to,
bleachers?
yeah, do you want to become citizens?
Yeah, I'm going to recuse, I mean, are we going to deliberate? Whatever the chair is going to do, are we just going to hear or are we going to deliberate?
Sorry, do you have a thumb drive?
I do, yeah.
I'm going to run it for that.
Okay, that's fine.
Just go with next slide.
Sure.
We don't deliberate, right? Madam.
So, I think we're going to just watch the presentation, correct, and digest that, so probably not make any decisions tonight.
I think it's going to be difficult. There was a lot of
There's a
information in the
lot of
process. I don't want to frustrate folks by not answering questions, but there are a lot of slides. So I'll kind of follow your lead, Madam Chair, as to how you want to handle that. We envision there being 3 phases. Mr. Parisi with a brief introduction, folks from Kleinfelder who are here with a 12-ish slide presentation that answers some of the cost-benefit questions, and then we'll pivot back to Mr. Parisi, and I'll join him at the end of the presentation. That's sort of the thinking. And I think we have it all in one presentation.
It should be, yep. It should be.
So, I ask because it would impair these two if they needed to recuse themselves or not. If we're not gonna deliberate, we're just gonna take in the information and move on, then.
If you'd like to handle it in that fashion, we can do that. We get to the end, and then
Yeah,
we'll determine how we want to proceed from there.
okay,
Does that sound?
yeah.
Through you, does that work for everybody?
We can always walk them. Yeah. And it's more comfortable to sit these.
Yeah.
These are nice seats.
You can be recused, but stay there.
What's that?
You can be recused, but stay there.
Yeah, we can still recuse this, push ourselves.
No, she's there. Sorry. It's been 4 years and we had some severe angry.
The one night he wanted to wheel himself back there.
I know.
Are we waiting on Michael or?
Yep.
He's
Get his thumb
running the
drive.
show. Oh, he's running. Oh, I
Let's
see.
get the show on the stick.
All right. Good evening. So I'd like to present to you some information on the Town of North Reading's wastewater project. With me tonight is Andrea Fisher. She's with Kleinfelder. She'll also have a little bit of information as we go through these slides to present based on the latest study that we did, additional financial analysis on the cost impacts of constructing a municipal wastewater system. And those impacts were looked at on a residential basis. development of residential units along the sewer route. So we'll have more information on that shortly. So the map, just we've seen this before, it's the in-town wastewater collection system is the route along Main Street or Route 28, Park Street to Concord Street, also a little stretch on North Street to Lowell Road. So just a summary of the work that's been going on for wastewater planning efforts from 2022 to 2024. As you may recall, in October 2021, the town meeting authorized funding for the planning, design, permitting of the wastewater system, a route that takes us to the GLSD, Greater Lawrence Sanitary District Treatment Facility. In the fall of 2022, government assessment financial modeling was done. A little presentation to the select board, town boards, committees, resident outreach. In March of 2023, town meeting amends general bylaw to require that a majority of the property owners along a sewer route would have to be in favor of betterments. So in April of 2023, the select board removes betterments from consideration and reviews options for the assessment of system development fees. September 2023, select board supports moving forward with final design efforts, utilizing ARPA funding to maintain the project timeline. In the fall of 2023, winter 2024, town's consultants assemble information regarding cost benefits of a wastewater project as well as the cost of operating a wastewater utility. So the project timeline in September 2023, we had SRF funding considerations. So to be eligible for this low interest loan, the project funding would have to be appropriated by June 30th, 2024. The design plans, actually at 90%, could still be submitted with the SRF application in October of 2024. So Mass DOT also had some considerations. We were planning a route through their roadway improvements along a section of Route 114. So we had to determine that route to get the GLSD, submit final design plans for the selected route to Mass DOT. We had basically get an agreement with Mass DOT signed in September 2024 and be ready for construction to begin June 2025. So items we want to discuss tonight: the cost benefit analysis of potential development, cost of operating sewer and potential offsetting revenues. There's information from Kleinfelder in integration into town's financial forecast. Update on out-of-town portion of the route and potential next steps to consider. So the cost benefit analysis, presentation by Kleinfelder.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Adrian Victor. I'm a water engineer with Kleinfelder, and I believe on the phone with us is Frank from FXM, who did this work with us as well. So we were asked a few additional questions by the town to identify what the new growth impacts on town operating costs would be, look at what the sewer operation and maintenance costs were, and complete a municipality comparison. So these are municipalities that are comparable to North Reading that have sewer and have gotten it in recent years. So there are different components of how the town can pay for sewers. There's the existing property value increase tax levy. There's residential new growth tax levy, commercial new growth tax levy, and then also alternative revenues. This is grants, land sale, system development, and connection fees. So to avoid increasing general tax, we need to increase the money coming in and decrease the money going out. So FXM, as I mentioned, they evaluated how new multi-family residential growth
would impact the town's annual budget. So this is just the new multifamily residential growth and how that would impact the town's municipal budget. There are two scenarios that we were asked to evaluate, one being the 2.5% growth factor, and the second being the historical average growth factor. So those are both detailed in this table. And this is projected over the next 30 years to 2056. So this graph here, there's a couple things we're showing, but at the 2.5% operating revenues, those are blue bars on this chart. The orange is the historical average operating costs, and then the green are building permit fees. So this is showing cumulative net operating revenues for for the scenarios that we just showed on the previous graph. So the findings from this are that multifamily residential development provides cumulative net positive operating revenues from 2026 to 2056 in all scenarios, so both scenarios that we looked at. The greater the number of multifamily units, the greater the cumulative net positive revenue. So we started to look, and we're finalizing these numbers at the cost benefit analysis. So some of the costs that we looked at are the project capital cost, the added municipal and educational costs that FXM evaluated, and then the potential sewer operating cost subsidy. So when the sewer starts operation, user fees will not cover the operating cost. Eventually they will, but not at the beginning. The benefits that we looked at are the increase in property tax revenue, economic expansion, environmental benefits, and increased building permit revenue, which was included in that previous graph. So as multifamily housing increases, there's a net positive increase in tax revenue. So we also did a survey of communities that are similar to North Reading that have installed municipal sewer, so that we can better understand what the impacts are to net growth and any other potential ramifications. So towns that we were able to talk to are Tewksbury, Wayland, Northborough, Gloucester, and Stoughton. I want to point out that these communities don't all have the same goals when they installed sewer. So some are looking to grow, some are looking to deal with septic issues. So it's not necessarily that they are all looking to grow. And that kind of is reflected in the responses we got from the survey. So in general, two of the main questions that we asked: has there been commercial development? And this is within the parameters of existing zoning as a result of municipal sewers. And so the answer to this was a resounding yes, with long-term financial benefits. And has there been residential development within the parameters of existing zoning as a result of municipal sewers? And so this was highly dependent on zoning changes and the town's planning and development goals. Some towns haven't experienced much growth, but some were not looking to grow. Others are experiencing growth and are expecting it to lead to long-term financial growth as well. So again, FXM explored the differences in new growth between sewered communities and non-sewered communities, and what the impact on the total tax levy was due to that prime difference. So the findings are that non-sewered communities have a lower average annual new growth compared to sewered communities, and commercial new growth constitutes a higher percentage of new growth in sewered communities versus non. We're seeing that the tax burden on residents would be diminished with additional commercial growth, so shifting more towards commercial and off of residential. So in summary, overall, residential development provides cumulative net positive operating revenues under both scenarios that we showed from 2026 to 2056. The greater the number of multifamily units, the greater the cumulative net positive revenue. Multifamily residential growth can be facilitated by the implementation of municipal sewers,
to the extent that zoning allows. So if you change zoning, you can increase your multifamily residential growth. Commercial growth is significantly facilitated by the implementation of municipal sewers. Also for North Reading, the majority of properties along the sewer route are commercially zoned.
So we're having a little bit of a broadcast issue with the presentation, so can we just make a quick transfer here? I'm gonna have to step in there and
Okay.
do some magic.
Got his tech hat on. Do you want me to stop now?
Let's see if there's any data.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt. I know you did.
For those of you at home, you can go to the bathroom, get your popcorn. Up in the hot tub.
I'll have to operate from here.
All right. Just looking to move that over. All right, so back in 2022, we did the first analysis. A market analysis in this case yielded some information. This chart or graph really shows what the impacts are with commercial new growth. And so there was a significant amount of property value increase, I think to the far right. 902,476 in value, yielding tax revenues of 13,537. So there was certainly some significant projections on attracting commercial development in town with sewers. Next slide. And so also looking at residential and multifamily residential properties along the route, there was certainly some property value increase in that regard, 698,587 at that time, bringing in a tax revenue of 10,479.
Can I stop you just for 1 second? Are these numbers like averaged from all of those towns you showed us? So where are these numbers?
No, these are market-based values at the time of this analysis in 2022. What the real estate market would yield for, say, the residential.
Here in North Reading?
In this region.
Oh.
And, you know, I mean, if you have some specific questions, I think Frank from FXM is on the line and can get back to that.
Okay.
All right.
Madam Chair, if
Yes.
we're asking questions as
Scully.
we move along,
Yep.
I needed to go back a couple of slides.
Why don't we do the whole thing first?
What,
So,
yeah, I just,
I-
all right,
yeah,
I'm
I would
sorry.
recommend that, to go through the whole thing.
There's a number of slides, so if we can get through the slides and.
It might
certainly
answer your questions, okay.
Get
So we'll
back
do-
to.
Are you jotting them down so you do them at the
I
end?
am, yeah, I am, but if we're.
Would you prefer to do this?
If we're stopping here, I just want clarification on.
All right, go
this.
ahead. Go ahead.
So you're basically using this slide to say right now, or, you know, when this study was done, this was done a while ago already. So you're showing us something that was already done previously. And you're saying along the route, proposed route, there's 1,302 units. And you're saying that by adding sewer here, it's gonna increase the value of those properties that are currently existing along the route. Is that what this slide is saying?
No, what we're saying is along the sewer route, there would be opportunity to develop additional units, 1,302 units that are not currently constructed.
And do you have, because this, again, this is an analysis we're paying a consultant to provide. Do you have a slide that correlates to that along the route where this potential development could be?
There was a little detailed look at the actual parcels that were abutting sewer, or where sewer would be constructed. And so there was.
Do we have that in this?
I don't have it in this presentation, but there was some analysis done on
Just
that.
another quick question on that, though, because a lot of this route, along this route is already developed properties, you know, homes and businesses on the route. So what you're saying is in addition to what's already there, that there's an analysis that was made on the adjacent parcels that are not built upon?
It could be built upon or redeveloped into residential, but it would be in accordance to the zoning. So it wouldn't be anything above our current zoning overlays.
Thanks very much.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So again, back in 2022, we did sort of a look at the different components of the growth, the value, the tax revenue, and also putting that into the Prop 2.5 formulas to yield, you know, a significant amount of revenue that would be assessed based on, you know, the values that would be the new growth values.
Madam Chair, this slide's not intended to frustrate folks.
Yeah, this is a lot, that's a lot.
It's more to show that there was an analysis that was done of the data that went over 30 years. The number to focus on, I think, you know, that you may recall from the fall of 2022 and from spring 2023, the lower right-hand corner, $411 million, $411,302,500, it says $86. You know, that was a compounded new growth number over 30 years of development based upon development supported by wastewater within our current zoning, so not even changing the zoning to allow for more. So I hope most folks remember that number from our earlier conversations. That was an aggregate compounded new growth. So that's not property value, that's tax revenue over a 30-year period of time. Again, the slide's not there to frustrate folks, it's there to show just more that there was a methodology that went into developing that number.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Yes, Mrs.
So
Hill.
that end number after 30 years on the far right-hand column is after the addition of that 1,302 new units.
Plus commercial growth in terms of square footage on another calculation that you saw earlier.
That's coming up, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we had a projection of the town's budget, the expenses, the revenues, looking at a scenario where there would be an expenditure level within, you know, Prop 2.5, and in addition to, you know, municipal services and school services, there are some fixed costs that really go above that. So we're showing 4.5% on the fixed cost growth rate, but certainly trying to be within the Prop 2.5% increases for other expenditures. So this is a no sewer scenario, and over the 30-year, the 20-year here projection, in fiscal 2043. The estimate is $17,388,000 in a deficit.
Madam Chair, through you, this slide ought to look familiar. It was in a presentation from the budget discussion 2 weeks ago, and it appeared multiple times at June town meeting last year, and then at the information sessions on wastewater as well. It's a financial projection tool developed by the finance director who's here and has been part of all these conversations, just to show what would happen if we were to take 20 years of history, project it forward, and then effectively limit it to the constraints of Proposition 2.5. So you see, when we get to 20 years out, a structural deficit in there of roughly $17.4 million. Again, that's a number we've been talking about. And Joe, I'm going to continue if that's all right.
Yes, please.
So this next slide, it's a much bigger deficit in a no sewer scenario. And what Lorianne did there with that slide is basically take that 20 years of history and just apply the same rates of growth forward, rather than limiting it to the Proposition 2.5 limitations. And our deficit becomes a much bigger number. So if folks feel like they've seen a couple of iterations of this, that's why. We've tried to show, hey, if we know what the trend has been, and it's almost to the percentage point on some of the things that we've talked about, including health insurance when we look at it. When you try to limit the growth to what Proposition 2.5 allows you to do, because of the rate at which costs increase, we find ourselves in a deficit situation. If you're maybe a little more realistic about what happens with our expenses based on the 20-year trend, that number is actually a much larger number, unfortunately. So this next slide is from the report that FXM provided, labeled Table 3. I don't remember the page number that was on, but I did know it. And Joe, can I just ask you to maybe explain that?
Sure, yeah, no problem. So again, we had two different scenarios, the operating forecast at a Prop 2.5 expenditure level. And the consultant looked at the additional costs that would be impacting the town's budget if sewers were to be constructed. So what were the additional governmental costs and the school expenditure costs? But there's also some revenues that would come in as well. So purely based on the sewer new growth. And so this is looking at that over a 30-year period, not a Prop 2.5 compounding situation. Just year after year, there would be net revenues based on developing 13. You can see the columns there: 500 units, 1,000 units, 13. So everything to the left of that blue line is within the zoning. Everything to the right of that blue line is would require some zoning changes to promote additional residential growth. But everything is a net positive in their forecast. So even if you were to build more residential units, these units, they're 1 and 2 bedroom units. They're not single-family homes with 3-4 bedrooms. They would typically, in this type of situation, yield, each unit, based on the analysis that was done, 0.12 students per unit. So in a high-density development of residential, condos or apartments along the sewer route, there wouldn't be a lot of students, basically, that would tax the school's systems, or and cost more than what we get in tax revenue.
Madam Chair, for you, just to clarify for folks, so this is showing, it's a cumulative new growth number, but what it is not is a compounding number, meaning growing each year that it gets added to the tax levy. That's where you may see some variation. And Joe has actually developed some slides that show that cumulative effect of it afterwards.
If you could wait 1 minute, Mr. Studo has a question.
And just clarify that, because I've seen this this just got delivered today. Is the extra police and fire and any other, is that under fixed cost expenditures or general government?
General government should be in that.
Okay, so the school one is obvious. What about other fixed expenditure? What is that? Is that, what's in there that got added in that would
there's a number of different things in there, and I think, Lorianne, maybe you have some more detail what is in there? Debt services in there?
Yeah, debt service, like Middlesex County retirement, health insurance.
Okay.
Just the fixed costs.
Okay. But this estimates those, because that was a main question that we were waiting for the answer of what the estimate would be for, you know, police, fire, municipal, school. Okay, I just didn't know what the breakdown was. Thank you.
So again, the consultant was able to look at those costs, do some analysis to project, you know, the impacts to both municipal services, educational services. You know, there are some impacts, but when he looked at the revenues that would be generated by, you know, the condo units, the values that these units are selling for, and the tax revenues that could be brought in based on, you know, tax rate that the town, you know, currently has, there was a conclusion that each unit would yield net positive revenues for the town, because it's such a low student rate per unit, I think, is one factor. And the residential services that would be required on the municipal side, they're captured. Again, the total of the both schools and municipal services were less than the revenues that were being projected to be brought in.
Mrs. Minipelli?
So just when you are showing 500, 1,000, 1,300, unit is, it could be an apartment unit, or a home, a single-family home, or
well, I think in the route, what you'll see for the most part is high-density condos or apartments. There may be on maybe Park Street some opportunity for a single-family home, but not on Main Street or Concord Street.
So when you say units, though, it's,
A dwelling unit,
yeah, just one.
which is typically going to be made up of 1 and 2 bedrooms in this area. I think we can move on from that.
Yep,
Okay.
please.
Madam Chair, through you, what we've tried to do here is, you know, keeping in mind those two projection scenarios, the one where we limit the growth of expenses to 2.5%, and the one that probably more accurately reflects the trend of 20 years at the 3 to 4-ish% increase. What the DPW director has done here is take this growth and show what it does to our long-term projections. And so we see that number that was in the $17 million range in the first slide is now roughly, it's reduced, doesn't go away, but it's reduced to just under $9 million in that 2.5% growth rate. So we add all the revenue, and we add to the extent we're able to get it modeled, the cost, and we do see gains. You know, percentage-wise, a significant gain on the long-term deficits that we have, but they don't go away in this scenario. We did the same exercise on the next slide here, which was showing that $49 million deficit. It similarly comes down to the tune of about $7 million to that $42.2 million long-term projection. Again, this shows if we were to just project the 20 years of history forward, this is what would happen. The realities of how we manage the town's finances, this is not what actually happens. We limit what we do. We make reductions in one area, we may identify limited new revenues, and we live to a smaller percentage. But if we just took that straight 20 years looking backwards and applied it forwards, you would get this number, and it would result in a smaller deficit by about $7 million if we were to see the growth that's identified in the sewer modeling. That growth being commercial growth and roughly 1,300 units of multifamily housing that would be allowed under our current zoning. Joe, I'm going to ask you to speak to this one, and then I'll move to the next one.
Sure, no problem. So the 2022 FXM report concluded that, you know, over a 30-year debt repayment period, that the combined commercial residential new growth tax dollars attributable to the wastewater system would yield a little over $24 million over 30 years. So when the commercial residential annual new growth is actually put into a Prop 2.5 calculation, then, you know, that, the revenue that is brought in through the tax levy over a 30-year period cumulative is $440 million, or $441 million to the lender. So in the FY 2024 FXM report, it was an analysis on education and municipal cost impacts due to solely on the residential new growth that would be attributable to the sewer. It concluded that there would be net positive tax return, tax revenues after the educational municipal cost impacts were satisfied. So again, when you put that into a Prop 2.5 formula, you're going to get a number that now would yield $552,242,000 and some change.
Madam Chair, through you, that was 411 million in the number we showed
Right.
earlier, and the number we showed in the spring of last year and the fall of the year before. That number's now a bigger number, probably wondering why. I believe that's tied to the increased value of the condominium units.
That was correct. I think they were looking at a unit value in 2022 of $470,000. Currently, that same unit value is at $515,000.
So the growth, just in the time we've been doing this study, the
Right.
value of the condominium units has been so much that it's further added to what that sort of grand cumulative compounded total is from 411 to 552 million. That's over 30 years that we're identifying.
Mrs. Minipelli?
Can you go back to the graph before this? So, in terms of these graphs that we've seen over the, I think Lorianne made these, right? You're not, we're not factoring in for this any kind of an override.
Correct.
We're just factoring in what historically is received over the course of time.
There's no override factored in, but there is the cost of the debt exclusion to fund the project. So that is roughly $5.8 million in average cost. It's factored in here as both an expense for debt service and a revenue under Proposition 2.5. So it's offsetting. And that's going to be important when we get to a later discussion with regard to cost benefit.
And just in terms of the projections that are here in the municipal, you have fixed growth municipal schools. Is it also factored in the cost to maintain the system, the sewer system? Was that a component of this that was incorporated into it?
The cost of maintaining the system is reflected in these numbers, but Joe, I believe you escalated that, right, or was escalated?
We did escalate that over a 30-year period.
Okay.
So, just to sort of bring home the issue of the financial projections, we use it, I say we use as if we've been doing it for, Lorianne created for us a year ago, a 20-year financial model that we're using now regularly in financial planning discussions. Not that we weren't planning in the past, but this is a different sort of level of planning that we've taken it to. We've generally limited the municipal and school operating cost growth to that 2.5%, like I indicated. You look at that actual history, the 5% for fixed costs, 3.3% for municipal, and 4.1% for operating. You get to that bigger deficit that I've shown you in the red and green graphic. And when you look at the residential build-out scenario consistent with our current zoning, which again we said a moment ago was 1,302 units, new units of construction, overwhelmingly multifamily units to be clear. And you use that 2.5% projection, that deficit goes from 17.4 million to 8.9 million, as I showed you between those two graphics. And then that same scenario, when we look at the build-out scenario consistent with current zoning, and we use the actual trend projected forward again, it goes from about 49.1 million to about $42.3 million. So we, again, it doesn't wipe away our deficits. It does make progress towards reducing them. I think it, more than anything, highlights how much our ability to provide services at the level the community wants is dependent on new growth, because without this type of development, the deficits continue to grow and grow and grow. So again, not saying it's the only way, and we've been talking about another method in the form of an operating override, but this is one component of it. I think it's really important to note that the comparisons presume that there's a $6.4 million average, I think I said 5.8 earlier, $6.4 million average annual debt service cost. So if we were to do this wastewater project, we'd borrow for 30 years, we'd have a loan repayment we'd have to make every year, it'd be about $6.4 million. We haven't netted that off of the cost of this. And for some in the community, that may be an important consideration from an investment standpoint. But for these purposes, we've shown that there will be an expense and there will be a revenue in the form of a debt exclusion. How much that can be reduced by system development and fees, I mean, we talked, that's very difficult for us to project forward, but we just want to be clear that we're sort of considering, for the purposes of these numbers, that the debt service is a startup cost that's offset by the debt exclusion. So we wanted to show here kind of what would happen if we were to have development above and beyond what the zoning allows, because that is a component of this. At some point, the community may wish to explore altering zoning. We already did it once in recent years on Main Street with a number of parcels in the vicinity of Winter Street. It may come up for discussion. So Joe's put together a slide that's intended to show you what might happen to the numbers here if we were to actually look at modifying zoning. I'm Joe, so I'll turn it back over to you for that.
Yeah, it's a busy slide, and it's really hard, really to sort of drill down into the numbers. But basically what we're doing is just taking a look at, 10 years out from now and another 10 years after that, back out to the 2043 projection period for our budgeting. And so we're looking at, over the 30-year period, developing 1,300 units using the Prop 2.5 limitations and growth factors, 1,300 units that would yield positive results over time. And on the far right, you can see that, just so that we keep that in mind, the debt service amounts are right here as well. But certainly our net revenues from all of these additional expenses, there's additional governmental expenses, educational expenses. We're looking at the sewer operations cost. We have total expenditures, but we also have revenues coming in from the new growth of the sewer. We also have sewer fees. Not all of the fees would be collected to offset the expenses that are appropriated in this column, but there'd be fees from sewer ratepayers, and there'll be one-time building permit fees for each of the constructed units. So there is a total revenue that's offsetting. I mean, the baseline is 0 in 2023, but 10 years out, you'll have, net revenues that, will be outweighing the expenses. We did that for 2,500 units. This would require some zoning changes to allow for additional dwelling units to be constructed above the 1,300 units here.
Yes, just two questions on this. So the 2,500 units would be similar in type, or what type of units are you talking about? Are you talking about business units or?
Multifamily residential.
Same, similar type. You may have this, I hope you have this later, but where's the data you're deriving that this growth is going to happen? What's a, for example? I think you mentioned in the beginning you studied other communities that had this over. What's the, for example, in this community that as a result of putting the project in, that gained 1,300 new units? I know we studied the area and the corridor to figure out where they could be developed, but what I think we need to, or I need to hear is just not the expectation that's going to happen. Where's the data? What's the data deriving that growth is going to happen?
So I would, to answer that question, I would bring in FXM for some detail.
Yes.
I don't know if we want to get through the presentation or just answer that question as we go along?
Doesn't matter, Madam Chair. If there's other information.
Well, while we're waiting, if you want to.
So, yeah, so Frank, are you there? If you could unmute.
I hope not.
Madam Chair, through you, I don't want to speak for Frank, but there was a report.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Oh, there it is.
Yes.
We can hear you.
This is the old report.
You want me to bring up the
We
new one?
want to look at the new one.
Sure thing.
This has been superseded.
Yeah, there's one from 28.
I'm sorry, what exactly is the question?
You want to repeat that, Mrs. Minipelli?
My question is, where's the data that we're deriving new growth of these 1,300 or 2,500 units is gonna happen if we put the sewer in? So in other words, in the beginning, it was discussed that other sewer communities were looked at, comparable, I think, to us. So what's the data that you're using, I think, to?
There is no, these are hypothetical assumptions that the town provided to us. We did not test the market for 2,500 multifamily residential units. These are hypothetical scenarios. In 2022, our market analysis suggested you had a capacity to develop about 1,300 multifamily residential units based then on existing and projectable trends in multifamily housing. These scenarios that were given to us for this updated assignment are hypothetical. There's no guarantee for any of this. We haven't tested this against existing zoning or new zoning or capacity. The 1,300 was tested against capacity, and the answer there is that you could fit 1,300 residential units into the existing parcels, though not all on vacant land. Much of it would be required to be redeveloped and parcels assembled accordingly. The same thing was true of the commercial analysis, by the way. I should point out that while we're focusing on residential and the impact that residential might have on net revenues, the real impact of the sewer is on commercial growth potential, not residential growth potential. And it seems to me that the test that we were asked to provide in this study, excuse me, was for residents who were concerned that new multifamily housing might be fiscally negative to the community. Our analysis shows that's not the case, and that the more, using market averages, which are 1 and 2 bedroom units, projected forward, the more of those that you can accommodate at an average price in 2023, excuse me, $550,000 projected over 30 years. Each of the development scenarios, if we go down to, you can take me down to the summary table, table 3. There. You can see that, there you go. You can see that with increased numbers of units, the net revenues increase under each scenario, whether it's current zoning or new zoning. Whether or not the market will bear 2,500 units, whether you want to revise your zoning to allow for 2,500 units, that's still to be determined. But hypothetically, if they were built, our analysis says that you would be fiscally positive cumulatively over that period of time. whether or not whether or not you assume the historical expenditure forecast, which is the above Prop 2.5 expenditure levels on the bottom half of this chart, or you stick with the 2.5% limitation, which is the top half. And whether you do 500, 1,000, 1,300, 1,500, 2,000, or 2,500 units, the bottom line for the town is a net positive number. That's what this analysis says. So you don't need to be concerned that sewer might enable you to do more multifamily development. We're not saying it, sewer guarantees it. In fact, in our analysis of other communities, sewer is not the major factor in residential development. It is for commercial. It's vital for commercial. You won't get significant new commercial growth without sewer. But this is strictly looking at residential.
Okay,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Studo has a question.
And none of these factor in, this is just general what deficits would look like, but it doesn't factor in like a key consideration besides the growth. Because I know that it's made pretty clear that, I mean, we kind of could have guessed it, that sewer wasn't going to be the peninsula to figure out all our fiscal deficit, but it doesn't take into account the shift of residential tax rate to commercial.
It doesn't change, it assumes the existing tax rate.
Okay.
Going forward, it does not assume any change in the existing tax rate.
The reason I mentioned that, and it's not so much for what Frank said, but also just that in the beginning of the presentation, somebody had mentioned that sewer is done for different reasons, not just for that. Here, another reason is that theoretically sewer may not solve every deficit, but sewer could theoretically shift that burden, which is something that it's a key component that not necessarily it's going to cover all costs, but maybe, you know, if you bring residential tax rate to $1.10 per thousand and the commercial to $1.60, that, you know, we still might have a little deficit, but now it's every time we need money where it shifted. So just something to keep in mind that when we're looking at these numbers, that it's not necessarily just how much, but you know, every little bit helps, and the closer we get to that higher commercial base, the sooner we can shift the tax burden around. So
I would say that's absolutely correct. That the sewer will definitely enable you to do more commercial development than you can without it. That's a fact. And our analysis 2 years ago showed that unmistakably for commercial development. So if you're going to change your tax rate to be higher for commercial, for example, you're going to have a hard time doing that unless you have sewer to promote and encourage and support new commercial growth. That would be my conclusion. I think you're absolutely correct.
Just to follow up on that, so I know, you know, it makes sense that it's vital for us to develop the, you know, the parcels commercially. Do you, but I don't know that a shift could occur unless there was a significant commercial development. So do you have a kind of sense of that, of, you know, when we're, right now we're 92% residential, and if we're lucky right now, 8%, it might have actually gone down to 7%. Do you have a sense, of when that, yeah, great.
Sure, I'll give you for instance, because we just did an analysis of potential major residential project in Bellingham. In Bellingham, the residential proportion of total valuation is 70%. In North Reading, it's 88%. And if we look at the per household costs of municipal service in Bellingham, for example, they're way lower per household than they are in North Reading because there's way more relative value of commercial. That's right. That makes a big difference. And you're at 88% of your total valuation is residential. In a town like Bellingham, it's 70%. And it makes a difference in the bottom line, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions?
I think we're,
Continue the
Yep.
presentation, and there may be more, Frank.
yeah, don't go away.
All right, I'll hang in. I'm recording the LSU game anyway.
I don't know, Joe, do you want to go over the second?
Well, it's a similar thing, I think, to save time, you know, to skip that, but it's looking at the 1,300 units and 2,500 units based on the higher historical 20-year average. So again, the 30-year projections with sewer calculated for sewer new growth tax dollars only. You can see that it's, if we can get to the bottom there, but down at the bottom there, you can see, you know, the numbers are, you know, getting larger as you accumulate down this column here. This levy starts at 0, so this is only the growth of the sewer, then the 2.5%, as in the Prop 2.5 calculations, getting the total levy that's being assessed. But if you add up all of the assessments over those years, it's a large number.
Yeah, I might, just to add to what Joe is saying, the original analysis was done because net new growth is exempt from the Prop 2.5 limitation. And that's what the purpose, presumably, of sewer is to enable you to have greater net new commercial growth than you would without it, not subject to the Prop 2.5 limitation. Now, I'm not saying net new growth is going to get you out of your structural deficit, but it will help.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, so next slide. So I think that's what we're hearing. So the conclusion, new growth associated with sewer under the town's existing zoning could be of 1,300 units, will reduce but not eliminate the town's long-term deficits. Allowing for additional housing further reduces the town's long-term deficits. 1,300 units is what current zoning would allow. Again, it's, you know, net positive, but it's not going to solve any long-term, you know, deficits that the town may be projecting at this time. So a little on the operation of the municipal wastewater system. So there's the cost to operate the system that varies from community to community. Factors could include size of the system to maintain, treatment costs, and the age of the system. The long-term goal is to have fees from the users cover the entire cost of operating the system. However, in the initial years where there's, you know, lesser users, the amount of revenue that would come in from those users would not pay for the overall operations cost. So there would be some amount of additional revenues that have to be identified to subsidize, you know, cost of operations. So connection fee revenues may be used to pay for a portion of the cost of operating the sewer system. Next slide. Looking at a breakdown of some of the estimated costs of operations. So there'd be some direct employee salary and benefits costs. There would be some contract operations for pump stations. There would be daily checks on pump stations. That's a requirement of DEP. We would also have some emergency contract services to respond to any kind of emergency if a pump station were to go down, some clogs in the collection system. We would have definitely wastewater conveyance and treatment costs in this scenario where we'd be pumping to GLSD. There'd be electricity costs for pump station operations. Initially, it would be at a lesser amount or an amount that's based on low flow, but as flow increases, pump time increases, electricity costs increase. There's also chemical additives as well to control odors at pump stations. And we reached out to a chemical supplier and got some accurate numbers on that cost. Diesel fuel for pump station emergency generators, so you have to have emergency generators at pump stations that can be used if power goes down. These will kick on and continue to pump the effluent to its treatment facility. And then there are typically some other miscellaneous expenses that will be budgeted for. And always good to have a small capital annual expense allowance as well. So you can see total of all those expenses in year one, $810,300. And we look to escalate that over the 30-year period. And that's been factored into our projections. So we talked about potential wastewater utility revenue streams of system development fee. It's a one-time fee paid by each of the property owners who choose to connect to the system. There's a municipal wastewater user fee that's basically a sewer rate charge. It's put on the quarterly bill like a water bill, and it will be paid 4 times a year, but it will be typically based on the cost of your budget, your cost of operations divided by the number of users or the gallons that are being used annually. But again, initial years, very low usage, still a significant cost to be shared. So that's probably too much of a burden in the early years, and looking for other revenue sources to defer operational costs would be my recommendation. Next slide. So system development fees certainly would fit the bill. State does allow for the town to assess these fees and collect them, and we could use those for operational costs. Now we talked about back a number of months now, looking at how would the fee look like, what would be the amount, can it be discounted? I think we determined that, yes, that could happen. It would be certainly a decision point that the select board would need to make at some point to better understand how much revenue would come in from system development fees to help offset the cost of operations. But we do know that the select board is no longer considering the use of betterments, which are charged to property owners along the sewer route whether or not they choose to connect. An assessment based on the mere fact that they about the sewer have access to a sewer at some point in time allows by Mass General law an assessment of betterments, but that is not the case as far as what we're proposing with this project. It would be purely a connection fee, a system development fee. As we do assess with the water system, we would do that with the sewer upon connection, and those fees would be reserved and could be used for deferred operational costs. Next slide. So you're probably familiar with this slide. This was a scenario I put together, and it looks to sort of show different percentages that would be a collection rate, if you will, of the costs incurred by the town for constructing the sewer. This is starting at a low percentage of 5 and going up to 50%. It could go all the way up to 100%. This is just a snapshot of what fees could look like, but also the fact that you could discount fees. The initial fee could be set at a higher rate, but you could choose to discount them in the early years. So this was a scenario that you could certainly still consider, or depending on how much revenue you need to collect to offset operational costs, you certainly could have a sliding scale here to try to hit a number. So next. So a little up to date on the out-of-town route.
Map here through you, so just a reminder, we are looking at a route that would go from the North Reading Andover town line on Route 28, short run up Route 28, then up Route 125 to Route 114, and then basically we were looking initially down into Lawrence to a pipe owned by the town of Andover, and I'll give updates on with regard to where things stand on that. So early on, we looked at this Mass DOT route and reviewed that route with Andover, North Andover. Mass DOT has indicated they're planning an improvement project on Route 114, basically in the vicinity of Merrimack College, that our planned route would travel through. DOT has expressed they're open to North Reading installing a wastewater conveyance pipe on Route 114 and 125, but they're requiring that the host communities, Andover and North Andover, approve such installation. Andover's indicated is generally amenable to Route 125 route, but obviously subject to further discussion. North Andover is not supportive of having a force main under Route 114. So, potential route through North Andover was mapped, and there were meetings held with folks to discuss the feasibility of connecting into their existing sewer system as a means of conveying our wastewater to the GLSD, Greater Lawrence Sanitary District treatment facility in North Andover. If wastewater was going to pass through North Andover preferred it would flow through their wastewater system with improvements rather than flow through a pressurized force main under state highway. And there's concern that a separate force main could cause conflict with future North Andover utility expansion, as well as generate odor issues of possible sewer overflow events. There are routes that connect to Greater Lawrence Sanitary District that would achieve this, but they would impact neighborhoods in North Andover. And for Andover, likewise, there's a potential sewer route through Andover that's been mapped, and there's been meetings that have been held to review the feasibility of connecting into it. The routes through Andover involve streets that had gas line work performed in recent years, resulting in the roads being repaved. And the indications are that mitigation of the impact of reconstructing on these roads could be costly. And just I think everyone is familiar with the gas emergency and explosions that happened in 2018. I think this is like my memory's failing me. But the sort of focal point was right where North Andover, and Lawrence come together, which also happens to be directly adjacent to where the plant is. It's the area we have to get through to connect to it. So I put through some slides more just for considerations. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but just things that I think we could think about. There's probably 100 other slides of this that we could put on here, but more for the board to consider. Our ability to negotiate with Andover and North Andover is limited. Both communities have been willing to work with us, but they do have concerns, and they are indicated they need to show some direct benefit for their residents based on the impacts. In other considerations, as I said, all roads lead to Greater Lawrence Sanitary District here. We seek to force a route through Mass DOT's layouts with objection from either community. Certainly could complicate relationships with GLSD, for which both towns are voting board members. So we all need to work together regardless of multiple parties that are involved. Again, just other considerations. The number of residential condominium units already in place is significant. I don't know that that was fully on everyone's radar going back a few years. We certainly saw those residents and heard from them. It's 962 out of 1,260 parcels, a large number of them being condominiums. And they've expressed little interest or need for public sewer in our conversations with them over the past couple of years. Our initial funding plan partially relied on veterans, which are a predictable revenue stream. This would have reduced the tax implications for properties that are not on the route. By vote at town meeting, and based on concerns expressed by residential property owners along the route, this is no longer an option for this project not considered. Again, other considerations. The new growth generated by development supported by having public sewer won't be realized for at least 3 years and will be spread out over a number of years. The town's financial position has become increasingly strained, resulting in what are now ongoing discussions for an operating budget, Proposition 2.5 override or tax increase as soon as this June town meeting. A general fund override is likely going, the general fund is likely going to need to subsidize the operation of this wastewater utility in its first few years. And we've been saying that going back 18 months probably with regard to this. There are ongoing efforts for a fire station construction project that will result in a likely request for Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion or tax increase at June or another soon upcoming town meeting. Your risks associated with delay. We've heard a lot of this with construction projects. Any delay in the project will likely lead to an increase in construction costs. The sooner we add wastewater capacity, the sooner we're able to realize the tax revenue associated with the growth that was reviewed in FXM's report. And a note that I think sometimes gets lost, and Mr. O'Leary remembers this, going back to 2017, I think, the project was intended to create a wastewater utility that the Martins Pond neighborhood could connect to at a lower cost in the future. We initially had Martins Pond in the scope of this. It was driving the cost of the project up so high that we opted, with the input of the board at the time, to remove it with the hopes of being able to establish a connection and maybe make it more affordable for the units around Martins Pond to connect in the future. There could be environmental needs that require wastewater being available in the future, which could potentially be at a higher cost than as its own standalone project rather than as a larger project or as an add-on to this existing project. Again, no one can really predict how that might go. So there's a lot of considerations, and I know we've thrown a lot of information out there. There was a point in time where some good conversations were had about how do we proceed with next steps, but there just is a lot of data points that I hear. I think folks, I'm sure, want to absorb it, but we wanted to try to sort of review a bit of the history, remind folks of what we set out to do, show that we, to the extent possible, because these are all projections, they're based on the best data we can come up with from the market, from our consultants, and from our historical trends, but in the end, they are projections. So, Joanna, did you want to add anything? Or?
No, I think there's certainly more information that can be presented or specific discussions or questions answered, but there is a lot. There is a lot out there.
And to be clear, there are multiple reports that go with this. One or two of them were from FXM in 2022. I was going to pull one up, Frank corrected me and said, well, go to the update. But that was where the market analysis and 1,300 units came from. It was a similar commercial analysis done in 2022. Those are both posted on the town's website. There's now a 2024 report that is focused on multifamily residential because that's where we were hearing a lot of the concerns. So we'll upload that. And then there's an additional report forthcoming with regard to comparative information for communities that have had wastewater already in our area. That's not quite done yet, but once it is,
My colleagues.
I think hearing from the expert is important in terms of, I understand these are projections, but what data are we basing, what data demonstrates that putting this in is going to bring in, some commercial growth? It seems rather obvious that that's what would occur based on the route that's being chosen. And the availability of parcels along that route, that could be developed into commercial parcels. And maybe the existing commercial parcels further development. So I think it seems obvious hearing from the expert that that's, vital, basically vital, sewer is vital to commercial growth. That's what the expert really seems to be. He did say that
he did
twice.
say that.
And that's kind of obvious again, but where does that derive from, in other words?
What I didn't see in here is a chart showing a change in the cost. I'm sure that, did I see that?
construction costs?
Yeah, I'm sure that is probably a lot higher than we thought it was before.
In 2022.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know the date of our last cost review. I feel like it was within the last year, but
Yeah, so the cost estimate was to the midpoint of construction, so as long as the schedule doesn't really change from where we were projecting at the time, I think we're still there. But you may have some different information there.
The typical use is engineer news report index, which is a cost construction index, but I don't know the numbers from the last time we did the 30% to now, what the change in percentage is. It can be looked up, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I mean, I just feel like it's important to see that. Mr. Studo?
So, this is exactly why we needed to know these numbers. We had none of these when we appropriated it, and you can't really make a decision on something this big to say whether it's good or bad for the community until you have all the numbers. And unfortunately, it costs money to get the numbers, like everything. I look everything percentage-wise. No matter where this goes, if all in, maybe $3 million for the design. What was the total number for the design?
for the phase that we're in.
Everything.
All in?
Everything.
Yeah, I think it was, upwards of about 7 million.
5.9 million?
And there was some additional
Yeah,
other costs.
So, I mean, from a percentage standpoint of total cost, it's, I look at things from a percentage. I mean, that's what we needed to get. I think we have almost every number. And again, I don't think anyone ever thought that this was going to zero out our future deficit number, but it's not just about where the money comes from or what the total number we need to run the town, but where it's coming from. And I think that's the big thing, that, if you need 70 million to run the town, but instead of an equal split, you can, maybe take a little bit more for the commercial side. I will say, because this is all new information to all of us, we got it. I took a look at this 20 minutes before the meeting started, so just in case, I do think though and we need to discuss this further, with all the other things we need to vote on, which I think that are very important because we have to run the town, I don't see how, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for any vote on this to happen before June. But I'll just say that out loud. So that's my opinion. I don't know. And again, that doesn't need to be answered now, but I've been on this for a while where there's just not enough time, and more because for those that want to stick around and don't want to go home and sleep, stay tuned for item number 11. You'll really like it. But that is the truth about that's how I look at it from that standpoint, from a total revenue. That we have other things that we need to pay for, and I think those are gonna take a priority to, and it does change a little bit. I haven't digested all this. It's too much to digest all at once. But I'm just trying to be realistic that, the first question is going to be, well, when are we going to vote on this? And I just don't, I don't see anything.
Three things, just getting back to the presentation. The uncertainty of the route is a concern. I think that's a new, revelation, that we had certainty with the route in terms of the design. How is that going to affect the taking a vote on it or putting this on town meeting floor? That's my thought. I don't expect any answer, but I would just, we don't have an option other than going through those two. There's no other way unless someone comes up with an aerial route that we can do this. And I don't think maybe that'll happen, but maybe not in our lifetime. But my second thought on it, or my second question is in terms of the cost to operate, in that slide that showed the cost, it didn't include the costs that we'll be paying the neighboring community. Did it include that? It did, okay. I didn't think I saw that.
370,000.
It was under wastewater conveyance and treatment. There's a lot.
Oh, that's included in there,
Yeah.
okay.
And wheeling.
And are we fixed with those figures that are still in negotiations with those figures? How could we if we don't actually have the,
We're in the pre-negotiation.
Purely
the
estimates.
point of connection? We really need to lock that in. But then my third, I guess, concern is there's talk about seeking an override now just for budget, just for plain old budget, which we do need an override to pay this project. We don't have availability or accessibility to outside funding for it. So we would actually be needing to, just like for the fire station, that's a type of, one-time capital improvement that we need the town to help cover the cost of that. So I view that distinct from a budget override. So that budget override request, if that goes on the warrant, none of that is actually going to funnel through to help pay for this. It would be a separate and independent request for override to pay for this. Is that right?
So none of what has been mentioned for the town meeting related to the operating budget is addressing any of the costs
Right.
associated with this wastewater project. There, I think on a sheet that was out there, there was a reference to $75,000 for town center wastewater, I think.
Yeah, well, that's
Totally
different.
unrelated to this project. That is connecting municipal buildings to an existing plant that's on the middle high school campus. So if anyone saw that, it's got nothing to do with this project.
Yeah. So that is just multiple, repeated requests for overrides, is what it sounds like to me. That's what's gonna happen. In order to cover this, we'll be up to 3 requests for overrides. One for the fire station, one for budget, and then one for this capital project.
Those are things that are definitely all in play at this
Yes.
point in time, awaiting schedule.
Just because it came up with the municipal wastewater, that wasn't our vote, that was ARPA money that we used for that. That was a project that was a long time want of ours, that we just could never do. So just throwing that to you, Mrs. Fillmore, that was one of the projects that we voted to do.
The
that.
downtown,
Downtown,
Yeah.
which is completely separate. It ties in the fire, police, the library,
Okay, all those
all
seniors.
those municipal buildings, yeah.
Because there already was an override the town did two overrides to build that school and to build that system, that wastewater treatment system that's there and has the capability to
Has
expand to serve
Capacity, yes.
that whole neighborhood of town buildings. So
Right.
that's why I think sometimes we have to address those, because that was already on its studied and already evaluated years ago,
Yeah.
because the town at the town meeting said yes.
Right.
So we opted to use those ARPA funds to cover the cost to
To get that
proceed
done.
with that, to get that accomplished. And then this sewer project doesn't have anything to do with that, and isn't even along that route at all,
Right,
so.
completely separate.
It's a totally separate way that we can address those needs now, because we have the infrastructure, we just need to build more of it, and that's why we opted to use those ARPA funds. That's a great point, Madam Chair. That's why I was saying we need to address those comments, because it's almost like we made a vote and used the funds on something that's related to this, and we didn't.
Right.
So those are active, ongoing projects for a long time that we
That we
needed
could
to
just
spend. the
never
money.
get
Yeah.
funded.
Right, right.
So it was long conversations, many conversations, yeah.
I'll just make one last comment, and then I think we can pick this up minus the wastewater number 11, so our distinguished colleagues can also, you know, say a few words. But when, I don't think that, and Mr. Gilberto has referenced this, everybody, this is an idea and a concept. I don't feel that wastewater, whether or not a vote gets taken tomorrow, next month, or 3 months from now, should be used as an excuse, and I said it out loud, as an excuse by some to delay things that the town needs to do. Because all I keep hearing is, well, we can't ask for this because that question's up there. And I think it's a cop-out. So just to say that there are things we need to do, from the fire station to capital projects, to a lot of things that are gonna be brought up, number 11. And actually, if we start tallying it up, let me tell you something, on the municipal side, we're gonna give the school a run for its money of how much money we need. So, it's just that we're not as vocal about it. So I just wanted to make that clear, because I think that it seems to be a narrative that, like, oh wait, Vincenzo, we can't talk about that new fire truck because you guys got the sewer hanging over our heads. No, sewer is just a hypothetical what if. We have a lot of info, but we have these other things that are important for the town because we need to do them. So I just wanted to get that out there, because it seems to, you know, I've heard it a few too many times now.
But it seems fairly clear now, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No.
It seems fairly clear now that we've been talking about this since 2022 as the first evaluation. Even with those assumptions built in, and those slides that we just saw, and the slides Lorianne did, and the slides that Joe went over, it seems obvious that we need new growth here. We need new growth, whether it's new growth residential or new growth commercial, but hopefully both. But we certainly need to have some economic development happen here to be able to just afford the regular cost of things, cost of operations here. And I don't think that can be denied, based on all the expert analysis and all the review that's been conducted. I think I said it when we heard the budget presentation. If Lorianne gives us a slide, we know that the veracity of the data, that we know that's credible data. So you can't turn away and ignore that. So we have to do something about that. Thanks, Madam Chair.
We weren't taking public comment. If I open it up to you,
That's our
it's gonna-
finance committee. That's it.
Yeah, the finance committee is a separate issue, yeah. Mr. Kelleher, who is the chair of the finance committee.
Just a couple of questions, clarification. All the projections that you showed talked about level service budget, and in one you held it within the 2.5. And in the other one you used historical numbers of 5% and 3 point something and 4 point something for the schools. Where does it consider any additional costs over and above level service of new services that may be required going from either 1,300 or 2,500 units? It would seem to me you're going to have things that are not level service now, of public safety, schools. I mean, even if you hold these to 1 and 2 bedroom, and I think that's a question of, is that what the market wants? Or does it want something more than that to come here to use our schools? So I just was wondering how those things are calculated into this net revenue that we've been looking at, or are they?
So I think if you're asking for an answer on that FXM would be the one to do that. They are in a column that's labeled additional governmental costs.
And so
Excuse me, sir, this is Frank Mahady. Our analysis, if you look at our report, projected the average number of bedrooms for new multifamily units based on market trends. And it's pretty solid, and if you look at our report, you'll see, you know, we've got 13,000 units sampled, and it's projected out over the past and projected out in the future. So if you assume an average of 1.5 bedrooms for new multifamily units, the number of school-age kids is 0.12 per unit, compared to what you now have as an average of 0.35 or 0.4. So multifamily 1 and 2 bedroom housing does not produce a lot of school kids. Likewise, the per household municipal service costs, which are also projected in our report, are what they are. So to answer your question, the simplest way to answer your question, yes, we have considered what the likely incremental costs are of residential, additional residential development.
Okay, that wasn't really my question, though.
I'm sorry.
My question goes to, if we increase the number of units by either 1,300 or 2,500, okay, we can get into whether or not they're 1 or 2 bedroom or they're 3 or 4 bedroom. That's not important to the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, does the public safety costs that would go along with adding those units, adding more policemen, more firemen, more engines, perhaps another fire station, are those included in the costs or not? And then if there are more kids going into the school, then because the units the demand for the units is for more than a 1 to 2 bedroom, is that factored into the cost of the schools? I think you answered the second one by saying that you're only having units that will be 1 to 2 bedrooms. Okay,
Yeah.
whether or not that's what the market really wants, I don't know, I haven't a clue, but maybe it wants something different. But the first one is that if we have all of these additional units, isn't our public safety cost and our DPW costs going to go up over and above the trend that we've seen for the last number of years?
I don't know the answer to that. We did not do a capacity analysis at some point out whether or not you need a new fire station, a new police station. That's a marginal cost. We only looked at average costs, but if you look at average costs, they assume that average costs increase with number of households. So to that extent, it's been accounted for. We've not looked at capacity constraints in the sense that there may be some thresholds in the future that you reach that require a new police station or a new fire station. Don't know the answer to that.
I think it's important to know.
Madam Chair, through you, I think at least partially the answer lies in the fixed costs that are included in the projection. So to the extent that those incremental changes have happened over time and are accounted for in purchases that we've had to make, capital equipment, for example, or debt that we've had to issue for work on public buildings, it is covered. But to the extent to which there's that variant, we need to build an additional school, for example, we need to build an additional fire station. That wouldn't be in the projection. But there is some accounting of it. It's going to be limited based on whatever that 20-year trend included in it for fixed costs.
You know, that's what I thought the analysis, it did do both, but it did do non-education municipal services. It factored and it calculated in the increase to non-education municipal services costs as part of that.
Not just the cost of operating the fire
Municipal
department,
services, yeah.
but also the cost of any capital investment that we made in that department over time. So I'm thinking of the $400,000 small renovation we did to the fire station, right? That's included in that projection going forward. Again, it's not a new building, you know, that's not the extent to which we model this, because I think that's a really difficult determination to make. I mean, the town's grown over the 60-odd years that we've had the existing fire station, and it really hasn't changed significantly. So, but to the extent we were able to project them, we did.
And I agree with Mr. Keller. It is frustrating because that is the issue with financial modeling, right? It is, and municipal is a little different, and that's what's frustrated me throughout this process. But I feel that, I think I said it last year at some point, that my understanding is that all the things that could happen in a town, if you have to consider every what if, you will end at you will get to a no with anything. I mean, I could say, what if tomorrow the fire truck engine goes just because it does? But I'm giving an example that's fictitious in a way, but it's a what if that I understand, but I don't think my understanding of it is that for something like another X from a capacity, like Frank used that word, that's his word, not mine. I feel like it could be very difficult to achieve. But I do think if we can, and I think Lorianne can speak more because it is her, wow, you're really getting a lot of credit for this model, I hope it works. I think they've put in some pretty lofty, like, future, like, cost increase projections that we've used. So I don't know if you want to add to it,
Yeah. I just wanted to explain, when the expense projection was done by both Joe and FXM, they didn't just take the existing budgets and escalate them by the 4%, 5%, or 3% for the town side. They also calculated a per household cost and multiplied it times the number of new units. And then they also calculated a per student cost and multiplied it times the number of students that would result from that. So that was taken into account. And it was compounded, so if one year you added, 8 students, and the next year you added 8 students, you did the sum total of 16 students being, added the full cost of that. What we didn't do was the capital cost of adding a new fire station, adding, that type of thing. But they did calculate, so in essence, like as if it were a bigger fire department, bigger police department, more staff at town hall, the per household cost was multiplied times the number of units.
No, Lorianne, that's exactly correct. That's what we did. We used the average per household cost of municipal services, you projected it forward for 20 years. And we extended your projections from 43 to 56 based on your average annual rates of growth. But in accounting for new residential development, we account for new households and new pupils.
All right, thank you. I didn't understand that. But the presentation was up, talked about 5% for fixed cost and 3.3 for municipal and 4 point something for schools. It wasn't clear, to me anyway, that you had added anything else into it. So I understand that, that makes sense. The way you did it makes sense, but it just wasn't clear from the presentation that that's what was done. I thought you had taken, because it said level services, and I thought you just took the difference between 2.5, which is what we're bound by, and the other percentages of what our real costs are. I didn't realize there was another component in there that added a per household. I haven't seen your report.
So the second,
I get it.
The second 2 pair of slides are mislabeled though, John. I think that's what you're saying, because they say level services.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
I'm sorry you didn't get the chance to review it beforehand, but
That's not your doing, Frank, that's ours.
It is in the report, though. It is in I have one from 3/28, March 28th. The one that was on there was the 29th, but we didn't actually go through it. Because there's lots of words in that report.
So I think, that was a thorough report. It was a lot of information to take in, think about. So that's what we need to do. And I think we can move on. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Jill. Sorry, citizen. It would have opened a whole can of worms.
I appreciate you considering.
We'd never get home. All right, we're gonna move on to number 10.
It's dense.
Approve and sign the Pulte regulatory agreement.
Madam Chair, through you, this is a regulatory agreement associated with the development of the additional affordable housing restricted on the additional 4 on a handful of buildings. This is an update to the regulatory agreement to reflect new rent and income levels.
If you want to come up, yeah, if you want to come up here.
Sorry. These are home ownership units, so these are prices of the units. The original regulatory agreement for the affordable units at Martin's Landing were done a couple of years ago now, and there have just been updates in costs. So there's a formula that the state allows developers to use. They've gone through that process to update their costs, various factors like insurance and mortgage rates. And so there's a slight increase. I provided the old unit costs just as a point of comparison, but we had our housing services office review the proposed new prices for the homes, and they said they were very much in line with what we've been seeing. So I did not have any concerns about that. I think it's a pretty routine approval that they ask of the towns, but they do ask us to approve.
Did everybody got to look at that?
Yep. Look straight ahead. Okay.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I move to approve and authorize the chair to sign the 2 original executed regulatory agreement amendments for units 105 and 205 in buildings 2, 7, 8, and 9 at Martin's Landing, located at 250 Martin's Landing Road.
Second. I have a motion. I have a second from Mrs. Manu Pelli. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
The only discussion is, I'm glad there's some affordable units over there.
Yeah.
That's a comment.
And I think I'm glad that the developer came to an agreement with the zoning board of appeals in their process and looking for some relief to agree to some affordable units.
Yep.
More than a comment.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know if this is a typo, but in the email that Maureen O'Hagan sent to Danielle, the amount for the 1-bedroom said $226,400, but in another document it was $2,000 more. So I was wondering what was correct. I sent a phone message to you this afternoon about what to do that.
Oh, I didn't get that. I don't know. The correct prices would be what's printed here. They would be bound by the signed regulatory agreement. I didn't notice the discrepancy, so I don't know how to answer your question.
The original memo that Maureen sent to you was $2,000 less.
It was, I'm sorry?
It was $2,000 less. It was $226,000.
I don't, I'm sorry, have an answer for that. I hadn't looked into it and I didn't notice it.
We can rectify that number. I mean, it is a determined number that's based upon some market analysis that one of the numbers is correct, and we can certainly make the correction.
Okay.
It's in the DHCD box or packet, so.
They did, they sent the
Oh,
spreadsheet.
one was February 15th, the other one was 3/29, maybe
Right.
that's the difference.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because the higher one
The
was the
dates.
3/29 and the February 15th was 2/26. Maybe that's the difference, I don't know. But it's probably still there.
These are 228.4 and 255.6.
I'm looking at the
Right.
email.
No, 1-bedroom, compare 1-bedroom to 1-bedroom, not 1-bedroom.
Oh,
Yeah, so the 1-bedroom on the February 15th one says 226,400, but in the chart, I guess you would call it, of 3/29, it's at it's
Yeah.
$2,000 more.
Okay, and that's the 228.4 is what they've listed in the
So it might
in the
just be a
document.
date thing? I'm not sure.
It probably was a typo, I'm guessing. I can
Could be a
go
typo.
back and ask them. But if the spreadsheet that gave them their price had the 228.4, then that is what matches here. And I'm guessing it was a typo in the email, but I can definitely check that.
You can sign that, that's correct.
Yeah. We'll double check. Thank you. Thank you. Was that the only motion for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so we're on to review updated FY 2025 revenue expense plan. What's that?
Did you vote on that?
We did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Authorizing now.
Just water cookie out now.
This is too excited. We're finally at umbrella event.
I was wondering what that one was. Lots of references to it.
Yeah. I thought he was talking about the minutes.
The minutes.
Yes,
Well,
it was unanimous. Thank you, Danielle.
Next thing, the presentation was more red. Even the select board red. You even wrote the select board updated red? Gonna use green for that? There's enough red.
Madam Chair, through you,
Yeah.
an update on the revenue and expense plan. The revenue and expense plan itself is largely unchanged. This slide should look familiar to folks. It was in the budget presentation 2 weeks ago. One thing that has been added is a line for modified level services. Maureen, could you just speak to that, what that number is?
What the modified level services does is it adds the most important elements to the budget. Like on the town side, we were focusing on adding the 4 new firefighters. On the school department, it adds their most key positions. It is not the entire wish list on either side. It's just really those items that both sides felt that they, for this round, really couldn't live without. So I just wanted to show the difference, in the deficit going forward. The growth for 26 and 27 is at a 4% rate for both. But that's the difference between the modified and the level. It's just the most key elements.
So the financial planning team is grappling with the shortfall in this current fiscal year, as well as how that plays out in future fiscal years. And the key thing, I guess, to report is there's going to be a conversation with regard to Proposition 2.5 override, which has certainly already begun at this point. How effective it is and how far into the future it can address the town's needs is directly related to how much it adds in revenue. And I think we saw that through a number of the slides in the wastewater presentation. Over time, the deficits expand. So that's something that the financial planning team, and for those who don't know, the financial planning team is made up of myself, the finance director, the superintendent of schools, the assistant superintendent and finance and operations director, representatives of the select board, the school committee, and the finance committee as well. We all go through on an annual basis, bringing forward an ultimate recommendation that's provided to the select board and ultimately at town meeting. So we're doing a significant amount of work in the background, digesting these numbers and trying to come up with a strategy to present to the town meeting prior to that, to the select board, the finance committee, the school committee, and the capital improvement planning committee. So the overall projections are relatively unchanged. Next steps, I think we continue to refine the requests and identify the needs for the next couple of fiscal years. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee continues to develop its fiscal year 2025 capital plan and to determine also our longer range needs. Financial planning team is meeting weekly to determine the range of funds needed for an operating override that would satisfy the town's needs for at least 3 years. So discussions are taking into consideration the likely request for additional debt exclusion funding for the fire station reconstruction project. To provide an information data point, the average single-family home for fiscal year 2024 is valued at $811,899. So there are a number of homes that are valued at less than that, condominiums that are valued at less than that, and there are a number of homes that are valued at more than that. Each $1 million in override dollars requested would increase the taxes on the average single-family home by $170.50. So I'm not here reporting any sort of recommendation, but I'm trying to just show what the baseline would be for folks to consider. And I'll show you a slide after this, so actually maybe just best to go to it now. This is information that's actually available on the state's website. It shows North Reading. That number right up at the top is the $1 million, and it's basically showing our current tax rate. Here's the breakdown of the value of the parcels, and the numbers here for that average home. Again, an amount has not been determined. I think it's likely to be greater than $1 million based on the projection you saw on the other screen, but we just want to show folks sort of what we're working off of when we're working to develop something to bring to the Select Board, Finance Committee, Capital Planning Committee, and School Committee to consider. So the Department of Revenue's page, very informative. It actually shows a breakdown. On the left-hand side is the assessed value of a property. Shows the current bill and what the estimated bill, and then in bold is basically what the impact would be. So the $811,000 valued average home sees $170.50 annually. It's between these two numbers here, 750 and 850. You see at 750 it's 157.50. At 850 it's 178.50. And this is available online. We'll link it up for folks at some point in the future. Again, not here to report any specific recommendation, but to just let folks know what's going on in the financial planning team discussions. In terms of those next steps, the school committee has a budget hearing scheduled for this coming Monday, April 8th. We've discussed and are holding a room for a joint select board, school committee, finance committee, and capital improvement planning committee meeting on Wednesday, April 10th. And we're working up against the deadline associated with town meeting for signing the town meeting warrant, which the board would be asked to do on Monday, May 6th. So, in theory, we would sort of know what the plan is for the operating budget. The discussion I think we've had here is about the town being provided a choice. One budget relying on a Proposition 2.5 override, one budget that would reflect what it would look like if we did not have such an override. That's sort of the guidance that we've taken from folks and are working on, and we'll continue our efforts this week and next in advance of that meeting on April 10th, which we believe is going to be at 7 o'clock p.m. in the distance learning lab. That's going to be a public meeting. We'll be posted as such. The public is certainly welcome to attend. I suspect it won't be treated as a hearing. I think that there'll be quite a lot to hear and to be discussed amongst the elected officials who will be in the room, but it will be an open public meeting that the public will be able to attend and view.
I'd like to, I think it's important that everyone realize that an override of 2.5, such as we've just been discussing, is different from a debt exclusion to cover the cost of the fire station. A fire station is built, you pay for it. When it's done, you don't pay anymore, like buying a car. You pay for it. After 5 years, you own it, that's it. A debt exclusion is an override is a different kind of thing. And I would be sad to think that individuals thought that first of all, that a fire station reconstruction was a part of the override. It's not. And they're just two very different projects, and they have different end times.
Okay, thank you.
Usually that, I don't understand.
That's a big,
I don't understand that.
You can discuss that with Mrs. Hurlbut.
I think it's important, she brought up an important, we're gonna be leaving pretty soon, I think, and I'm going home with no understanding of that. That was a good point.
Mr. Gilberto, can you clarify that for Mr.
I thought it was a great explanation. I'm not
I
sure
did
how much
too.
more I can-
I did too,
But I understand the question.
I never could get it.
Sure, so a Proposition 2.5 override, such as the one that we're discussing here, in whatever amount is voted, which has not been determined at this point in time, to be clear, is something that increases taxes in the year that it's voted and for each year moving forward. So I'm going to use a hypothetical. If we were to say it was going to be a $1 million override, the tax levy would increase by that $1 million and would be spread amongst all the community in the tax rate. And then that would be carried forward in future years. So it wouldn't increase $1 million every year, but it would increase $1 million in the first year, and it would stay increased in future fiscal years. Carry forward. It would carry forward, yes.
But I think you could write, I read online that you could make a different agreement, only 1 year it stops.
So for a capital, so there's a couple ways to do that. If we were to do what they call a capital exclusion, we were buying equipment with this, you could raise it for that 1 year for that specific purpose, not borrow, but spend that money as if it were cash to acquire that fire truck, for example, and then the next year, that increase would go away. This is, what we're discussing here relates directly to the town's annual operating expenses.
But I still don't have an answer for what is the debt exclusion.
A debt exclusion is authorizing that the borrowing costs, so if we were buying property, the mortgage payment can be raised above and beyond the existing tax levy or tax bill. And everyone in the town would share that. And that stays in place until the mortgage is paid off. Then it goes away. But what we're talking about for this particular financial mechanism is our annual operating costs, costs that we incur every year, for which we are projecting for which we project shortfalls, but manage to solve smaller deficits each year. But for this upcoming year and moving forward, for which we see we're not going to be able to solve. So that's why we need to make this request for an override, to raise these funds, these additional funds, for not just this upcoming year, but the future years after that.
Okay, I think that was an excellent explanation. Thank you, Mr. Gilberto, and we're going to move forward.
I'm not sure it was as good as that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Both. Very
So,
helpful.
is everybody good with moving on? Mr. O'Leary?
Just the point is, whatever the dollar amount that's going to be suggested and be put forth by the board for town meeting, I would hope it's going to be for a projected, a long, a significant period of time, even maybe longer than 3 years anyway, but at least 3. Doesn't mean that the board has to raise the tax limit to that level in the first year. We can gradually do it over 3, 4, 5 years. You're going to authorize us, town meeting will authorize us to increase the levy limit for $1 million or $3 million, whatever it's going to be. Doesn't mean that the board's going to spend that the first year.
Right.
We're going to spend it incrementally. It's not going to hit you immediately. It'll come along incrementally and increase the levy limit forever and a day. But incrementally, it's going to get us over a hurdle for a period of time. Doesn't mean we're going to do it in the first year. You're going to authorize us to use a dollar amount. Doesn't mean we're going to spend it immediately. I would imagine, I can assure you, we're not going to spend it immediately. We're going to spend it gradually over a period of time.
And none of that relates to what Mrs. Hurlbert's explaining for the fire. None of that is being used for, it's a totally separate thing.
As Mr. the word pointed out, it's like putting
Yeah.
a mortgage on a new fire station or a renovated fire station, and if it's paid off in 30 years, it drops off.
Yeah.
That was
Away.
Mrs. Hurlbut's whole point, was to make sure that
Yes.
that's not
Separate, separate.
So, Mr. Governor.
I just want to affirm what Mr. O'Leary has said. I can tell you that those are the discussions we're having in financial planning, looking at over multiple years, phasing in whatever that increase might be. The way we need to ask for it is it, we're planning to ask for it is in that single vote, but we wouldn't be spending up to that maximum rate in the first year. We've looked at it, probably will be a 3-year phase. There's more work to be done on that. As the person who introduced fire station to this in the bullet point here, my only point in bringing it up is that as we're having these conversations, we are cognizant there's a significant planning effort underway, and that would likely result in a future discussion about a debt exclusion. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up. It's not part of what this would be roughly.
Mr. Studo.
Also, during financial planning at the, a good point brought up by the finance director was that there's a lot of questions surrounding, well, we have all this money, these piggy banks here and there. I used to think the same thing until I got elected, and then you realize that you can't, they're very specific what things can get used. But what we're also going to put together when the presentation for whatever number that is that we're going to try to add up everything we have within reason, but then we're also going to show what projected projects out there that need to be funded that are either kick the can down the road, and we're going to try to do it from a school, municipal, and capital side. And just something that exercise I think is going to show that if we added up all the cash the town has, let's just say that if that's all you had for a down payment on a house these days, you wouldn't be buying a house. So it's the number for things that we can realistically think we need to fund, from the fire station to capital. I don't want to get into that tonight, but there's just a lot. So I think that's something else that's coming, that's being discussed in financial planning, because I do agree that it's like, well, we have this money here, why can't we use it? But then when you start like looking what we have and what we actually need to do over a longer period of time, you realize that number percentage-wise is not a very big number, because I think that, things are getting very expensive and they're not going down. So I only bring that up because Mr. O'Leary and you mentioned that that's one thing also being talked about in financial planning, that even when we ask for whatever we ask and we don't know what that's going to be, it is going to be a fraction of what. If we really ask for what we really need to just bring the town up to speed from the last 20 years, wow, that number would be a lot of for sale signs. So.
Mr. Buckley, the chair of the school committee, and he's also part of the financial planning team. If you'd like to come up and.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to make one quick point on what we're doing in finance planning team. The Prop 2.5 override, we're not only looking at operating budgets. It's a little bit of what Mr. Studo was saying. But the last time we were looking at the numbers, we were trying to build into operating budgets capital projects, which honestly haven't been in the operating budgets very much. We're trying to put money in so that when bridges fail or things like that, we can start building that into the operating budget so that we're not always caught trying to figure out how to pay for it. To try to build some money up in there. And we even were discussing the shift of the tax burden for seniors and about how to pay for that. And so we're trying to not have a number of different overrides or exclusions on future town meetings. We're trying to look at all of the needs. Fire station would be different, but we're trying to look at all the smaller things so that like if a bridge fails, we don't have to go for a $2 million exclusion every time. So just when we're doing this, and we'll talk more at the 10th about this, but the last meeting, a lot of what we were looking at was how big the number should be so that we don't have to have multiple different town meetings talking about different expenses, where we're talking about a capital project here, we're talking about a school budget, a town budget, firefighters. We're trying to look at all of it into one Prop 2.5 override.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley. Thank you, Mr. Gilberto. We'll go on to the federal grant policy.
Madam Chair, through you, we tried to incorporate 5 comments that we received from Mrs. Vanitelli, and I believe we have adequately reflected them to the extent possible in the policy, so we would ask for final approval. If the board's so prepared, I think we prepare a motion.
Okay. Madam Chair, I move to approve the final reading of federal grant policy for the municipal departments of the town of North Reading as amended, and to incorporate said policy into the select board policies.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mrs. Manu Pelli. Any further discussion?
Sorry that I forgot to send them to you. I know you asked.
Oh, that's okay.
Minnie, you asked, it went out of my.
It was a lot to read, and I'm
So
glad
good that
she
you,
wrote it.
good
Yeah, I know, me
that
too.
you. Yeah.
15 pages.
That's good.
And listen.
Good.
Thank you for the work you did on it, because
Yeah.
that was way too much for me to handle, to be honest.
I'm glad you were enthralled with it.
I know, I'm glad somebody was.
We're all really,
Took me some time, but I got through it.
thank you. Took me time just to flip the pages.
Contract nerd.
Okay, so we
Contract
have
and
a
policy
motion, we have a second, and discussion,
We decided.
and all in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
You did, Kate.
Okay.
Oh, we're only on 32.
Review draft warrant for June 10th, 2024 spring annual town meeting.
Did this change from 2 weeks?
I don't think so.
Madam Chair, through you, I'm just going to focus on a handful of warrants for which there's
Okay.
outstanding work being done. The Article 27, the easement relative to Pine Ridge Road, will be working with town council on that. It's a private residence on which there is stormwater running. The town's liability is a bit of a question mark, but I think the feeling is that we may be able to address needs within that particular neighborhood by having an easement in place, so we're looking further at that. Easements necessary for the Chestnut Street Bridge replacement. There's some land impacts with regard to the property where the bridge would be constructed, and I think we're still working through the plans on that we would be seeking town meeting authorization for. That's to allow us to finalize that the design. I think we're well aware of the status of the zoning bylaw amendment on the MBTA communities. I think the CPC is meeting next Tuesday night to discuss that, so we'll wait their report. Article 30, you know the Veterans Committee is looking at renaming North Parish Park. I don't know if there's going to be a report from the committee with the official name or a specific name, but once we have that, we'll work it into the language. I know it's veterans, but intended to be veterans related.
I believe it was Veterans Park, but I will make sure that they clarify that.
The Article 31, the chair and I have had some discussion about consolidating our existing veterans committees into potentially one committee. And one of them was authorized by town meeting, so we think we may need some town meeting authorization on that. That's still being worked on amongst the veterans committees, but we'll have final language in time for the board to sign the warrant. Articles 32 and 33, I believe Ms. Robert has left, but they both relate to the fire station building project. Article 32 would be basically an article to authorize a construction project. It was submitted by the Facilities Master Plan Committee. I believe it's going to be endorsed by the Fire Station Building Committee as well. Again, it's a debt exclusion funded project. I think there's more conversation to be had about whether the timing is right at the June town meeting or not, but certainly want to acknowledge that this article was submitted. I think in the wisdom of the committee, they submitted Article 33, which would allow us to simply request funding to take us through the bidding phase of the project, and at a near future point in time, have actual bid results for the town to consider at the town meeting. So that it's sort of an either or, I think. But candor, we decide Article 32 for the debt exclusion is not the direction we're going in. I think we may want to consider taking it off. But that's not been determined at this point. I think the outcome of the April 10th meeting will largely help us in hopefully making those decisions. So that's all.
Just a question. This circuit breaker, would that not be in there? The circuit breaker bench, I didn't see it in there.
Let me back up here. So we have increased the senior tax rebate, but we don't have a specific, what I think would need to be a home rule petition authorization. So I don't know if there's language being worked on or if you want to put.
Just tell me what you need and I'll try to get it together.
It's kind of, I think, depend on the program, but yeah, I mean, we should definitely have that on the warrant for.
So you need some sort
Article
of.
15 is it, right?
So that's for the existing tax rebate program to increase the dollar. I think there would need to be I know there would need to be a separate authorization for that, but we should work through what that language might be for. Okay. We'll probably need to consult with town council on it to draft it, because it would result in a home rule petition like we've had recently. So they need to draft that.
Do you want me to remind you about that?
Yeah, we should definitely talk. Yeah.
I guess I'll see you tomorrow. So.
Yeah.
Chair, Putnam House roof. Is that, I don't know if that comes under town buildings.
No, we probably would want a separate article for that, Mr. Rosary.
Bring your wallet. Okay, so we'll look at it.
Bring your bank.
But you might want to, wherever you place it, it should be, that should be the town building repairs. It shouldn't just be tagged on at the end. And again, the senior rebate program should be next to the other one. Yes. I think, as far as where we align them,
Sure.
rather than jumping around, let's keep the subject matters alike.
So yeah, we would probably, the senior tax rebate would probably, relief would probably be a new Article 16. And then we would add Putnam House roof as Article 24. Okay. And we renumber everything else.
There was also a suggestion made by Mrs. Hurlbut to me to put the glossary in the back of the warrant instead of the front, so that people get right to what the business is instead of. So I just wanted to bring it up.
Structural warrant structure?
Yeah.
We don't have enough problems.
She
I think
wants
Mrs. Hurlbut's unhappy with my
She wants the
responses.
glossary in the back of the warrant instead of all the pages before. She just feels that it's easier to just open up and see what the warrants are than
Like what the
go
index
through.
is?
It's a suggestion that she asked me to bring up. So
I think it's helpful the way that it's written for people as they're going through.
I mean, you did
The
rewrite the
glossary
branch.
gives people a definition of terms that they're going to be looking at in the article.
Would you want to have that up ahead of time?
I think that's why it's up front.
Yeah, so
Seems to make
then when
sense.
you're reading through, you have already reviewed what the terms are.
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
I think it's good the way it is.
All right, I brought it up, we
I did,
discussed
thank
it.
you. I don't have enough bandwidth in my brain to think about that.
Okay. So we're all set?
Yep. Yes.
Going on to meeting minutes?
Minutes, are we good?
It's just one.
No way.
Just one.
Impossible. Which one do you want to do? You said we're skipping some? Is that what you meant?
Should I just do, Madam Chair, may I?
Yeah.
I distinctly recall Mrs. DeShara speaking to us at public comment. And I also think Mrs. Fillmore did too about the fire station. But it reads here, Amy Sonier, Fieldcrest Terrace. I don't think that's right, is it?
That's her new
Yes,
name.
that's her current name.
Oh,
She's
all right.
married.
So, okay, wow, for some reason I thought she had did, but then what about, didn't Mrs. Fillmore talk to us too about the fire station?
Yes, I did.
So just, I would have meant to add
Which?
December 18, page 10. Because I remember that, I pointedly remember the discussion, so. Oh, that's, okay, good. I didn't realize so many had changed hers.
Yeah, right now we're Will.
Yeah.
Nobody was arguing.
Yes, I remember
Goes by a
both.
couple of aliases, right?
I don't think November, that is.
December 18.
Oh, December 18th. Okay,
Page
so we're
10,
not doing that one?
public comment.
Well,
I
we
just
can do it
moved-
as amended.
Move to amend to incorporate, Mrs. Fillmore spoke about that as well, public comment.
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a motion to amend and a second by Mr. Studo. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Mrs. Fillmore, we do listen to you.
Yeah, second.
And Amy too.
So now on the main motion.
Okay, so Madam Chair, I move to approve the amended regular session minutes for the December 18th, 2023 meeting.
Second. Oh, geez. I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Madam Chair, I move to approve the regular session minutes for the January 8th, 2024 meeting.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. Madam Chair, I move to approve the regular session minutes for the January 29th, 2024 meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
One of those minutes I have to sign. Right? Which one do I have to sign?
One of them, Mr. O'Leary's.
You won't be, I'll be amending it. And then you can
Oh.
sign it.
I'll sign the tail, I'll sign line page.
You can sign last page, yeah.
We just do it. What's
His
that?
That works for
signature
me.
page is not began.
Veterans Committee?
Last page, I'll keep it the same. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go into appointment for Veterans Events Committee. Trying to find it, whatever.
Okay, Madam
We have a
Chair.
motion, yeah.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move to place a nomination of the following name for appointment to the Veterans Events Committee for a term to expire November 6, 2026. Deborah Aldrich Full.
Okay,
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. Studo. I am the liaison. We had a resignation by Jim Mahoney for personal reasons, and Debbie Aldrich was originally a full member and went down to an associate for her own personal reasons, but now asked to please be a full member, and we all were in favor of that. I had a conversation with the chair, and we all agreed, so.
Okay. So it's Deborah Aldrich Full.
Full term.
Full.
No. Oh, again, I got to trick that.
Yeah.
Deborah Aldrich.
Everybody's good. Last name.
It's
Same
the
last
only-
name.
Everybody's last name is
Same last
Full.
name.
Can you only do this in the future?
All right, are we saying her name?
Jennifer, can you in the future just like parentheses so I know it's not just a...
Sure.
Because so many people have add-on names. Because I look like
That's
a
a really popular name,
Maybe we
this
should check them all.
Mr. O'Leary,
Thank you.
Deborah Aldrich.
Mr. Wallner,
Deborah Aldrich.
Mrs. Manu Pelli. Deborah Aldrich. Mr. Studo.
Deborah Aldrich.
And the chair is Deborah Aldrich.
Okay.
Town administrators report.
Madam Chair, through you, if Mr. O'Leary can pass that book, my reports.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. April 6th. I have no report this evening.
I love we got an April Fool's tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. I have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Studo. I have a second by Mrs. Manu Pelli. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Wow, it's before 11.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging in there.
2 weeks.